Chapter 1842 My Fu Clan Will Accept All Challenges. Chapter 1842 My Fu Clan Will Accept All Challenges. Fu Yen sighed in his mind. In reality, he naturally didn't want to become enemies with so many 3-star forces. After all, the Fu Clan wasn't a top-notch 3-star force. In fact, just the lunar sect alone could already suppress them. However, in order to butter up to the Rock Palace, he couldn't abandon his current facade of arrogance and haughtiness. Otherwise, his performance would be lacking in sincerity. The more difficult it was for him to protect Ling Han, the more it would display the Fu clan's unwavering determination. Of course, Fu Yen was unaware that the Zai clan and the Thundercloud Palace still hadn't received news of their holy daughter and holy son's death yet. Otherwise, he would definitely scream that he had been screwed over. To oppose 2 celestial king-tier forces, was this not an act of stupidity? However, it was a shame that he didn't know about this. Thus, he continued to resolutely protect Ling Han and butter up to the Rock Palace. He wore a dignified expression, and he clasped his hands behind his back as he calmly said, "Listen to my advice. Don't touch a single hair of this person." What? The dividing soul tier elites were astounded. In fact, some of them even started to doubt their own heirs. Indeed, Fu Yen was more powerful than all of the other cultivators present. However, the Fu clan wasn't a clan that could suppress all of their forces. Not only was it also a 3-star force, but it was a 3-star force that only ranked in the lower quartile. As such, where was his confidence coming from? Once the other forces formed an alliance, it was guaranteed that the Fu clan would be instantly razed to the ground. In any case, could Fu Yen rival them if they teamed up to attack with their battleships? Even Ling Han and the Empress were slightly astonished. Not long ago, hadn't they severed all ties with Fu Gaoyun? That being the case, why had Fu Yen suddenly rushed over to protect them? Moreover, it was as if he were willing to protect them at all costs. Had he taken the wrong medicine? Anyhow, Ling Han had initially planned to appear before the dividing soul tier elites before entering the Black Tower to escape. However, since Fu Yen had stepped forward, he was willing to observe the situation first. "Lord Fu Yen, are you sure you want to do this?" Qianao Yu asked. A cold expression had already spread across his face. He was indeed weaker than Fu Yen. However, the Qianzhao clan was no weaker than the Fu clan. Thus, he didn't need to act in a meek and subservient manner. Moreover, there were many other elites beside him, all of whom were on his side. The Fu clan was inciting public wrath, and an offense could even kill an elephant. Not to mention they were a pack of wolves. The Fu clan was nothing before them. Fu Yan's expression darkened, and he said, "Are you threatening me?" Although he was under immense pressure, could the might of an immortal palace tier elite be challenged by any random person? Regardless of whether I'm in the right or not, since you're only a measly dividing soul tier cultivator, you have no option but to cower and be blindly subservient toward me. "Lord Fu Yen, do you know what this person has done?" an elite from the lunar sect asked. His name was Zhao Lingfeng. Fu Yan's heart jolted. One had to realize that the elites before him were all from different forces. Moreover, they were from at least several dozen different forces. What has this brat done? He felt a strong urge to slap Ling Han a few times. However, his expression remained calm, and he said, "I genuinely don't know. He killed the holy son of my sect." Zhao Lingfeng roared. Dong! Fu Yen felt as if his heart had been struck by a heavy blow. If it weren't for his incredible self-control, his expression would have definitely changed drastically, and he might have even exclaimed in astonishment, "Brat, you're far too much of a troublemaker." The lunar sect was one of the 3 most powerful sects in this region. Thus, if they truly decided to unleash their full power, they could definitely destroy the entire Fu clan. Yet Ling Han had actually killed the holy son of such a sect? Such audacity. And the potential successors of my clan as well. 2 of them. Qian Zhaoyu said in a menacing voice. He had only received this news just then. Not only had Qian Zhao Tian been killed by Ling Han, but even Qian Zhao Yang had been killed by him. This was a blatant provocation toward the Qianzhao clan. Thus, Qianzhao Yu wouldn't cower or back down regardless of who stood before him at this moment. This was because he represented the Qianzhao clan, a powerful 3-star force. As strong as Fu Yan's self-control was, he still couldn't help but grimace upon hearing this. How nice. Not only did you offend the lunar sect, but you've even offended the Qianzhao clan. Moreover, you've killed 2 of their potential successors. Are you trying to destroy their entire future generation? And the holy son of my sect as well! And the potential successor of my clan! And the dividing soul tier elites spoke one after another, revealing Ling Han's long list of crimes. Holy fuck! At this moment, only these 2 words remained in Fu Yan's mind. He finally recalled the information that he had read before. While Ling Han had still been extremely weak, he had already battled against the Ding clan and the Xiao clan. In fact, he had even destroyed the physical body of a prodigy from the Han clan. He had offended these clans to the extreme. This was an audacious person, and he had a history of provoking others. His ability to cause trouble was simply through the roof. Grand Elder, oh Grand Elder, aren't you screwing me over by telling me to protect this brat? With my skinny arms and skinny legs, how can I withstand the wrath of so many forces? As he listened on, Fu Yan's mind gradually became numb. He was confident that no piece of news could astonish him anymore. Fu Yan gritted his teeth and said, "Regardless of what this brat has done, no one is allowed to target him." In the end, he still had to utter this sentence. However, he felt a slight sense of anticipation because only by saying this could he display the worth of the Fu clan stepping forward. I'm risking so much, so the Rock Palace has to give something in return, right? Milady, we're still not going to step forward? A female knight asked. The golden female knight of the Rock Palace waved her hand, and said, "We'll let these clowns perform for a while longer. Anyhow, we've already found our target, so there's no need to hurry." Understood. What expression would Fu Yan wear if he heard this exchange? He was performing with all his might, yet he was being viewed as nothing more than a clown. However, this also made sense. After all, did a celestial king tier force truly need cannon fodder like him? Moreover, was the Rock Palace an ordinary celestial king tier force? In their eyes, even celestial kings beneath the 5th heaven were nothing to worry about. That being the case, how could they care about the Fu clan? It was clear that the Fu clan had chosen the wrong target to butter up to. The gulf between them and the Rock Palace was far too great, and this was analogous to a village leader buttering up to a supreme emperor. Would the emperor give a damn? Meanwhile, the elites from the lunar sect and the other forces exploded upon hearing Fu Yan's words. This person had gone fucking crazy. If the Fu clan had been a 4-star force, they would have had no option but to concede. However, they were all 3-star forces, and the Fu clan more so ranked in the bottom quartile. Yet, they actually dared to act with such haughtiness and arrogance? Had the Fu clan gone mad? An elite from the Beiyu clan couldn't help but warn. Lord Fu Yan, I'm sure that you're already aware. We represent 37 different forces, and which of us is weaker than the Fu clan? There was a threatening edge to his voice. However, Fu Yan had already made up his mind. He smiled and said, "Juniors, I'm actually doing this for your sake. Don't ruin yourselves." Upon hearing this, the dividing soul tier elites couldn't help but explode with fury. A string of curses raced through their minds. He's killed our successors, and you're preventing us from exacting revenge now. Yet you're claiming that this is for our own good? Good your mom. Are you taking us for fools? Since Lord Fu insists, we naturally don't dare to do anything now. However, can the Fu clan withstand the wrath of so many forces? Zhao Lingfeng said in a menacing voice. To say nothing else of the other forces, just the fury of the lunar sect alone was enough to destroy the entire Fu clan. Fu Yan flicked his sleeve and said, "Give me everything you've got. My Fu clan will accept all challenges." His voice was filled with confidence and haughtiness. "Oh? But can you truly accept them?" a cold voice suddenly asked. Everyone looked over, only to see a figure descending from the sky. They were radiating with an aura that was no weaker than that of Fu Yen. In fact, it was significantly more powerful. Chapter 1843. Can you truly accept them? Chapter 1843. Can you truly accept them? Immortal Palace Tier Elite. Lord Zai! The Dividing Soul Tier Elites exclaimed. They hurriedly kneeled down and greeted him with respect. When coming across elites, it was natural for those who were weaker to pay their respects. Moreover, not only did this Immortal Palace Tier Elite possess a superior cultivation, but he had even come from a Celestial King Tier force. Thus, to say nothing of them, even the ancestors of their forces would have to treat him with utmost respect. This person was called Zai Ji. Fu Yan's heart involuntarily jolted upon seeing him. He could act with arrogance and haughtiness before Qian Zhaoyu and the others, and it wouldn't matter even if they teamed up to target him. He could dispose of them with a single hand. Even if they used their battleships, he could still rely on his movement techniques to calmly dodge their attacks. He would face absolutely no risk of suffering any wounds. The cannons of these battleships needed to lock onto their target. With his strength as an Immortal Palace Tier Elite, would he allow these cannons to lock onto him? Meanwhile, Ling Han wasn't afraid of things exploding out of control. He was enjoying the show, and he even retrieved a chair to sit down on. The Empress sat in his lap, and he appeared as carefree as could be. Fuck! Fu Yen almost exploded in rage. Who's caused all of this trouble? How detestable! If it weren't for the Rock Palace, I would have already diced you into mincemeat. Before Zai Ji, Fu Yen didn't dare to act with such arrogance anymore. Brother Zai, give me some face this time. Zai Ji's expression was ice cold, and he calmly said, Who do you think you are? Give you some face? You're not worthy. Fu Yen was brutally rejected, and he couldn't help but go red with anger. He was also an Immortal Palace Tier Elite, yet he was being humiliated before so many people. How could he endure this? Lin Fang and the others chuckled coldly as they watched this. Ling Han, so what if you're freakishly talented? You're destined to die today. With two elites from two different Celestial King Tier forces stepping forward, Fu Yen won't even dare to make a peep. At that time, how can you, a measly third Severance cultivator, escape from the grasp of the Immortal Palace Tier elites? It's completely impossible. You're dead meat. Fu Yan's breathing quickened, and only after a short while did he finally manage to compose himself. Brother Zai, has this brat also offended your mighty clan? Upon hearing this, Zai Ji's expression became even colder. He definitely had to exact revenge. However, the culprit who had killed their successor was only at the Severing Mundane Tier. As such, he wasn't willing to announce this before so many people. It was far too humiliating. Oh, the successor of a Celestial King Tier force was even weaker than some random cultivator, and they were even killed with ease? Announcing this would be equivalent to humiliating the Zai clan. Enough with the nonsense! Hurry up and piss off! Zai Ji said in impatience. Not only was he more powerful than Fu Yen, but he had even come from a Celestial King Tier force. Thus, he didn't need to give him any face at all. Yet, Fu Yen seemed to feel overly confident, and he continued to babble rubbish before him. Fu Yan's legs were trembling. He was naturally aware that Zai Ji had come from a Celestial King Tier force, and he was naturally aware that Zai Ji was someone he could only gaze up at. However, he gazed toward the female knight from the Rock Palace. The sight of her defeating the 9 elites from the Fu clan was still fresh in his mind. He gritted his teeth and said, Brother Zai, if it isn't some great matter, the Fu clan is willing to make compensations for this brat. In his mind, Ling Han might have been overly arrogant, and accidentally offended the successor of this Celestial King Tier force. This was something that could be resolved with peace. Ha! Zai Ji roared with laughter. However, there was no smile on his face. How laughable! After killing the successor of a Celestial King Tier force, a measly 3-star force was now claiming that they were willing to offer compensation. How would they compensate them? What would they compensate them with? Did they know how many resources were needed to raise a Severing Mundane Tier successor who had severed heaven and earth? It was enough resources to instantly plunge a 3-star force into poverty. Fine, since you insist, it won't hurt for me to tell you. Zai Ji's expression was ice cold, and he continued. This detestable brat killed Zai Bingyun, the successor of my clan. Pa! Fu Yan stumbled back and collapsed to the ground. What did it matter that he was an immortal palace tier elite? Right now, he was feeling as weak and feeble as could be. Brat, how have you survived until now? Fu Yan wanted to cry, yet no tears were forthcoming. He had initially wanted to butter up to the Rock Palace, yet now. Not only had he failed to butter up to them, but he had even offended the Zai clan now. Even seeking death wasn't this bad. I'm done with this. I'm completely done with this. Fu Yan hurriedly crawled up, saying, This brat is actually this detestable? I was also deceived. Brother Zai, please! He was indeed an elite, and his attitude changed quicker than the pages of a book could be flipped. The other elites couldn't help but look at him with disdain. Weren't you all arrogant and mighty just then? Why have you suddenly become a coward? Oh, it's fortunate that you said this. Otherwise, you'd already be a corpse. Crackle! A bolt of lightning descended from the sky. This was a solidly built man, and his entire body was covered in arcs of white lightning. As they intertwined, they formed numerous symbols of the great Tao. Just his presence alone was enough to frighten everyone present. Everyone had to face heavenly tribulation. Thus, lightning was undoubtedly something that many people detested. This man was Sun Jin, an elite from the Thundercloud Palace. Fu Yan's frail heart involuntarily shuddered again. Did Ling Han also do something to the holy son of the Thundercloud Palace? Gasp! It can't be right. He didn't dare to ponder this anymore. Holy fuck! How can there exist such a troublemaker in the world? The Fu clan definitely can't shoulder his crimes. We simply can't shoulder his crimes. He respectfully stepped back. Although Qian Zhaoyu and the others were gazing at him in disdain, he simply pretended that he couldn't see their gazes. This was no time to act with arrogance. Ling Han, how audacious of you! Sun Jin roared. His voice was like booming thunder. Ling Han grinned and said, You're right, I'm indeed an audacious person. Upon hearing this, those who had been slightly doubtful about Ling Han killing Zai Bingyun were fully convinced that he was the culprit. Just listen. He was actually speaking to an immortal palace tier elite with such disrespect. That being the case, would he give a damn about killing a severing mundane tier cultivator? Sun Jin faltered upon hearing this. He hadn't been praising Ling Han, so why was this brat so proud of himself? He hummed before continuing. Since you've admitted it, you can go die. Brother Sun, let the Zai clan deal with this brat, Zai Ji said as he stepped forward and grabbed Sun Jin's wrist. He stopped Sun Jin from attacking Ling Han. Ling Han was only at the peak stage of the third severance, so how had he killed Zai Bingyun and Luo Changfeng? This brat definitely harbored some great secret. As such, Zai Ji wanted to personally kill him so that he could pluck his soul and steal his secrets. Sun Jin chuckled and said, Fine, I'll kill him, and you can take his corpse. Zai Ji also chuckled, saying, Since you're already willing to hand his corpse to me, why don't you let me kill him as well? Brother Zai, you're pushing things a little. This brat killed the holy son of my sect, so how can I let him off without doing anything? Is it not the same if I deal with him? The most important thing is the result. The two elites started to argue with each other. Both of them wanted to kill Ling Han, as doing so would allow them to pluck his soul at this first instance. After all, they couldn't trust each other to share his secrets. Everyone came to a sudden realization upon seeing this. They had naturally come across similar situations before, so they all knew what these two elites were arguing about. Ling Han sighed and said, Have you two finished arguing or not? I don't have so much time to waste. It was a shame that the large black dog had already left. Otherwise, he could unleash his might and dispose of these measly immortal palace tier elites in the blink of an eye. Brother Sun, then let's rely on our own abilities, Zai Ji said. He knew that he couldn't convince Sun Jin, so he decided not to speak any more nonsense. Agreed, Sun Jin said with a nod. In the end, arguments between cultivators were always settled using power. They both lashed out to snatch Ling Han's life. Pa! However, just as they raised their hands, 2 lengths of white silk suddenly shot over from the sky in the distance, wrapping around their wrists and forcefully stopping their attacks. Chapter 1844. If you have any complaints, come to the Rock Palace. Chapter 1844. If you have any complaints, come to the Rock Palace. Ling Han had already been about to bring the Empress into the Black Tower. After all, he knew that he couldn't rival 2 immortal palace tier elites. Even if he channeled the indestructible Heaven Scroll, he would still be blasted into smithereens. Moreover, rising from the ashes was no fun task. Doing so would leave him with severe wounds. Who is it this time? He was extremely puzzled. One had to realize that he didn't have any strong background in the celestial realm. In fact, he was much like an orphan who didn't have parents. He could only rely on his own strength. Sun Jin and Zai Ji were both astounded. That person hadn't arrived yet, but they had managed to obstruct them simply by transforming their regulations into 2 lengths of white silk. This power was incredible. Friend, please come over for a discussion, Sun Jin said as he looked into the distance. A dragonhawk flapped its wings and instantly soared over from the distance. It measured 30 meters in length, and if it spread its wingspan would also measure 30 meters. There was a female knight sitting on the dragonhawk, and she was dressed in a suit of golden armor. Her hair was silky smooth, and she appeared extremely mighty and dignified. Behind her, there was a flock of dragonhawks, each of which was carrying a female knight. However, these female knights were all dressed in suits of silver armor. Piss off! The female knight in golden armor said coldly. Friend, you're taking things too far, Zai Ji said in extreme displeasure. Who was he? He was an elite from a celestial king tier force. Yet, this woman actually dared to speak to him like this. The female knight in golden armor glanced at him before waving her hand. Pa! A whip suddenly appeared in her hand, and she continued to stare at Zai Ji just like that. It was as if she would whip him if he dared to say anything else. Zai Ji shook with fury. Since when had he ever been viewed with such contempt before? Very well. Very well! By the looks of it, I need to test out this friend's. Pa! The female knight's whip lashed out before Zai Ji could even finish his sentence. This was a terrifying scene, with countless immortal beasts materializing in the air as the whip whistled over. However, all of these immortal beasts were either dead or riddled with wounds. This was an attack that stifled even heaven and earth, and this was an attack that caused the heavenly bodies in the sky to tremor. It was as if these heavenly bodies were about to plummet to the earth. Zai Ji had no time to feel astonished, and he frantically raised his arms to block this attack. Pa! The whip struck him, and he was instantly sent sliding hundreds of meters back. His sleeves were destroyed, and there was a long and bloody gash on his arms. Blood gushed out. He was a mighty immortal palace tier elite, yet he had been wounded with a single attack. Sun Jin was stunned by this sight. One had to realize that Zai Ji was just as powerful as him, and they were both 5th secret elites. As elites from celestial king tier forces, which of them would be a pushover? However, Zai Ji had suffered minor wounds after blocking just a single attack. This was enough to illustrate the gulf between them and their opponent. Friend, how should we refer to you? Sun Jin asked. The female knight frowned before pointing at Ling Han, and saying, My task is to take this person away. Those who obstruct me shall suffer death. How domineering! Fu Yan's heart thumped as he watched this unfold. They were all from celestial king tier forces, so why was the Rock Palace acting in such a domineering manner? Perhaps there also existed huge gulfs between different celestial king tier forces? Had he made a mistake? Should he have persisted until the end? Ling Han also found this to be extremely strange. He didn't recognize this female knight at all, so why was she willing to step forward and help him? Moreover, she was even willing to offend 2 celestial king tier forces. Friend, this brat has killed the successor of my Zai clan, And he's also killed the holy son of the Thundercloud Palace. How can we let him off scot-free? Zaiji said in a baleful voice. He knew that this female knight was more powerful than him, yet he still had a 4-star battleship. Was this something that an immortal palace tier elite could withstand? The female knight was seething with killing intent as she gazed at Zaiji with a cold expression. In the end, however, she decided not to attack him. Instead, she said, "If you have any complaints, you can come to the Rock Palace. It doesn't matter who comes, the Rock Palace will accept all of your challenges. Now piss off." Rock Palace! These words erupted inside Ling Han's mind. No wonder they were willing to step forward and help him even though they didn't know each other. As it turned out, they were from the Rock Palace. "Where's Hu Niu? Has she come?" he hurriedly asked. A hint of displeasure spread across the female knight's face, and she said, "The young Imperial Empress title is Tianyun." Ling Han chuckled and said, "Hu Niu hasn't come." The female knight seethed with rage. "Is there something wrong with your brain? I already told you that the young Imperial Empress title is Tianyun. Why are you still calling her Hu Niu? What a basic name! If she could, she truly wanted to kill this person who was soiling the young Imperial Empress. However, upon thinking of Hu Niu's longing for Ling Han, all she dared to do was daydream about this. The female knight gritted her teeth. She forcefully suppressed her anger and said, "The young Imperial Empress still needs to cultivate, so she didn't come over." Zaiji and Sun Jin were both extremely confused. What in the world was this Rock Palace? The Celestial Realm was far too large. To say nothing of the Western Celestial Realm that was separated by the boundless seas, it would be almost impossible for one to know about a force on the same continent if it was located slightly further away. Perhaps the Purple River Celestial King or the Thundercloud Celestial King would know about this force. However, they might not reveal this information to their subordinates. Generally speaking, it would have been almost impossible for them to come across elites from the Rock Palace. "So what if you're from the Rock Palace?" Zaiji asked in displeasure. Could the Zai clan allow one of their potential successors to die for nothing? The female knight was already filled with fury, and Zaiji's question was a spark that caused her to finally erupt. "You're seeking death," she roared. Whoosh! Her whip whistled over again. However, Zaiji was prepared this time, and he hurriedly unleashed a celestial technique to block this attack. An overwhelming aura surged into the surroundings, rising from his head and soaring into the sky as it transformed into the projection of a roaring white tiger. This tiger then spat out a giant golden sword that slashed at the female knight. Pa! The whip cracked down, and its might was surprisingly 100 times more powerful than before. Zaiji was astounded, yet there was already no time for him to dodge. The whip sliced through him, ruthlessly cutting him in two from the head down. He wanted to unleash a celestial technique to knit his body back together, yet a devastating destructive power swept through his body. Pa! The two halves of his body instantly exploded, transforming into a cloud of mangled flesh and blood. He was a mighty 5th secret immortal palace tier elite, yet he was easily killed with a single strike. Gasp! Everyone went numb with shock. A cold chill shot down their spines, and cold sweat trickled down their foreheads. She was too powerful, far too powerful. She had killed a 5th secret elite on a whim. Moreover, she was completely uncaring about the Celestial King tier force that stood behind him. They didn't know what to say. Sun Jin involuntarily took a few steps back. His legs were trembling, and his situation was no better than what Fu Yan's had been just then. Meanwhile, Fu Yan's mouth was agape with shock. He was rendered completely speechless. So be it if you killed Han Luo on a whim. After all, he was only the immortal palace tier elite of a 3-star force. However, Zaiji is a member of a Celestial King tier force. Yet you still killed him on a whim? Is this extreme audacity, or is this extreme confidence? What kind of existence is the Rock Palace? Where do they rank among the Celestial King tier forces? The female knight cast a cold glance at Sun Jin. Although she was looking at him, Her eyes were filled with haughtiness and disdain. It was as if she would kill him if he dared to make another peep. What could Sun Jian say? He quietly shut his mouth. He certainly didn't want to die. However, he had already come to a decision in his mind. When he returned to the battleship, he would definitely use the cannons to obliterate this arrogant woman. The surroundings were deathly silent. This female knight was far too domineering, and under her might, even the celestial King Tier forces didn't dare to say anything else. Meanwhile, Lin Fang, Tengsin, and Wei Nian went pale with apprehension. They hadn't imagined that Ling Han would possess such a terrifying background. Holy fuck! You're clearly the successor of a celestial King Tier force, so why were you acting as if you weren't? You've truly screwed us over. Chapter 1845 Killed with a Single Strike. Chapter 1845 Killed with a Single Strike. Anyhow, Ling Han hadn't planned on sparing Lin Fang and the others either. It was just that they had fled quickly enough. Ling Han stepped forward and said, Come, let's have a battle. If any of you can withstand 3 of my strikes, I'll let you off the hook. His gaze was locked onto Lin Fang, Tengsin, and Wei Nian. Lin Fang and the others wanted to flee, yet they were instantly surrounded by 9 female knights in silver armor. The 3 of them could only cast hopeful glances toward the elites of their clans. However, these elites all turned around and pretended that they couldn't see their request for help. What a joke! Even Zai Ji had been insta-killed, so wouldn't they be seeking death if they stepped forward? Lin Fang and the others exchanged a glance, and said through gritted teeth, Let's take a gamble! They knew that they were no match for Ling Han. However, if it was only blocking 3 strikes, it most likely wouldn't pose too much of a problem. Come at me together. I don't have much time, Ling Han said calmly. 3 strikes. As long as you can withstand 3 strikes, I'll pretend that you're thin air. I'll let you off the hook. The 3 of them became even more confident upon hearing this. After teaming up, could they not block 3 strikes from Ling Han? Did Ling Han truly think he was a god? The female knight in golden armor was also extremely interested. She clasped her hands behind her back, and didn't tell Ling Han to hurry up. She knew that the young Imperial Empress was deeply enchanted by this man. However, was Ling Han worthy of the young Imperial Empress? Thus, she wanted to observe just how powerful Ling Han was. If he were too trashy, she would resolutely kill him, even if that meant being punished or killed by the sect. She would prevent him from ruining the young Imperial Empress. Lin Fang and the others chuckled coldly in their minds upon seeing Ling Han standing there, and not moving. They exchanged a glance before calmly preparing their most powerful attacks. Boom, boom, boom! Radiance of the great Tao suddenly erupted from their bodies. As King Tiers, they were naturally no pushovers. This was especially the case since they had already advanced to the peak stage of the 4th severance. They were close to invincible in the severing mundane tier. The 3 of them were teaming up, and they only needed to block 3 strikes. They were confident that they could succeed. The female knight remained silent, so the others naturally didn't dare to speak, either. Even if they wanted to suck up to her, they could only shut up and watch the show now. At this moment, Fu Gaoyun and the others had just exited the mystery realm. They weren't clear about what was happening, but they couldn't help but click their tongues in wonder upon seeing that Ling Han was about to battle with someone again. How strange! The elites of the lunar sect are standing right there, so why aren't they capturing Ling Han? Why are they allowing him to battle with Lin Fang and the others instead? Huh! Why has Grand Elder Fu Yan also come? They hurriedly ran over to ask him about the current situation. After a short while, they were all stunned by what they heard. Holy fuck! Ling Han is actually the successor of a celestial King Tier force. A bitter expression spread across Fu Gaoyun's face. If he had withstood the pressure, he could have been enjoying the fruits of this friendship now. However, he had at least maintained a good relationship with Ling Han. This was a great fortune. Meanwhile, Fu Xiaoyun was feeling extremely downcast. No wonder the Empress had said that she wasn't worthy of Ling Han. She had initially viewed herself as having a higher status before, yet compared to Ling Han now, it was clear that she was miles and miles behind him. Cheng Zhong and the others were also feeling immense regret. They could have grabbed Ling Han's coattail before, yet they had actually refused to do so. If they were given another chance, they would definitely jump on and ride Ling Han's coattail. His A*S truly wasn't our *ped? Or else why is his hair still not growing? Situ Xiaozhen asked. She was still pondering this strange question. It was anyone's guess how her mind worked. Ling Han suddenly felt his A*S tighten. At the same time, a cold chill shot down his spine. He couldn't help but shudder. Die! Lin Fang and the others roared as they unleashed their most powerful attacks at Ling Han. By actively attacking, they would naturally have a greater chance of withstanding 3 strikes from Ling Han. Offense was the best defense, and they had to transform their reactiveness into proactiveness. Of course, they definitely couldn't kill Ling Han. In fact, they didn't even dare to severely wound Ling Han. After all, the overwhelming might of the female knight in golden armor was already deeply imprinted in their minds. A grin spread across Ling Han's face as a terrifying aura exuded from his body. The expressions of the dividing soul tier elites suddenly changed. They were all stunned by what they felt. This was an incredibly powerful aura. Although it hadn't reached the dividing soul tier yet, it was already far superior to the peak stage of the 4th severance. Most importantly, Ling Han's cultivation was only at the peak stage of the 3rd severance. That being the case, how could he unleash such a powerful aura? Even Sun Jin felt slightly numb with apprehension. He had initially thought that Ling Han had used some kind of underhanded technique to kill Luo Changfeng. Judging from the current situation, however, Ling Han didn't need to use any underhanded technique at all. The female knight in golden armor was also slightly astonished. Although Ling Han was still weaker than Hunyo at the same cultivation level, the Rock Palace was a 9th Heaven Celestial King tier force. Just how incredible was their potential? Only after using an exorbitant amount of resources had they raised Hunyo to where she was now. Meanwhile, Ling Han had no background and no support. He had achieved everything by himself. Yet, even so, he was only slightly weaker than Hunyo. This was absolutely stunning. No wonder, the young Imperial Empress is always longing for him. He's a true prodigy. Although he's still inferior to the young Imperial Empress, at least they won't look too bad together. He just barely qualifies. Boom! Lin Fang and the others charged over, and their attacks were so powerful that it seemed as if they were about to obliterate heaven and earth. Ling Han shook his head. He then activated his divine fetus and fused it together with the fire element regulations. With this done, he summoned a strike that far exceeded his current cultivation level. Boom! A dazzling column of flames burst through the sky before violently exploding and sending currents of chaotic fire element regulations into the surroundings. The dividing soul tier elites were forced to activate defensive techniques to block the shock waves of this attack. Otherwise, they would have affected the juniors of their forces. The power of this attack definitely surpassed the severing mundane tier. The seniors from the Lin clan, the Ting clan, and the Wei clan all wore bitter expressions. To say nothing of surviving this attack, it was difficult to say whether any piece of flesh of Lin Fang and the others would even remain. Sure enough, once the flames disappeared, Lin Fang and the others were nowhere to be seen. They had vanished from the world once and for all. Even before his transformation, Ling Han could have dealt with Lin Fang and the others with ease. Thus, after unleashing the most powerful attack of his divine fetus, it was only natural that he could kill his opponents with a single strike. Otherwise, it would have been a complete waste of an 8th Heaven Celestial King's hundreds of millions of years of hard work. Ling Han clapped his hand before turning around. He then smiled at the female knight in golden armor and asked, "Senior, can we set off now?" If he had to cross the boundless seas by himself, his journey would definitely be filled with dangers. However, since this female knight in golden armor had come, it would naturally be much easier for him to cross the boundless seas and enter the western celestial realm. They would face almost no danger. He certainly didn't want to experience a deadly accident just moments before he was about to arrive at the western celestial realm, and reunite with his wives. The female knight in golden armor pondered for a moment before saying, "No problem." She swept her gaze across the surroundings, and everyone involuntarily lowered their heads. They didn't dare to make eye contact with her. Even Sunjin was no exception. They were both at the fifth secret, yet this female knight possessed a battle prowess that was numerous times more powerful than his. He couldn't rival her at all. Right now, there was only a single thought in his mind: he would return to the battleship as soon as possible such that he could activate its cannons and blast this woman to death. Humph! Plotting something sinister? Die! A murderous aura suddenly appeared in the female knight's eyes as she launched a palm strike at Sunjin. Sunjin was both astonished and enraged. I'm only fucking considering this right now, and I haven't actually acted on it. Yet, you're actually targeting me for this? What the fuck? However, since she had already launched an attack, he had no choice but to react. Otherwise, he would be inviting death. He didn't dare to block her attack, so he shot back in retreat instead. At the same time, he shouted, "Friend, don't misunderstand me." Chapter 1846 Thundercloud Celestial King? Heh. Chapter 1846 Thundercloud Celestial King? Heh. The female knight in golden armor didn't give a toss as she continued to attack. It was clear that she wanted to kill Sunjin. Sunjin roared with fury, yet he didn't dare to exchange blows with the female knight in golden armor at all. He hurriedly retreated into the distance, and he tried to return to his battleship. At that time, he would regain the upper hand. Crackle! His entire body was surrounded by arcs of lightning, and it looked as if he were a god. At this moment, however, he was fleeing in disarray. Given a choice between life and dignity, dignity could naturally be sacrificed. In any case, exchanging blows with the female knight would be blind and reckless courage. It wouldn't be true courage. Not only did regulations of lightning possess incredible destructive power, but they would also bestow upon one immense speed. Sunjin's speed was astonishing, and in the blink of an eye, he had already dashed back to the battleship of his sect. A smile involuntarily spread across his face. It was now his turn to counterattack. Pa! Right at this moment, however, he suddenly felt a tremendous force traveling over from his toe, and rapidly dragging him down. Looking down, he discovered that there was a whip wrapped around his foot. Whoosh! He was dragged down at an incredible speed. No! He roared in fury. However, he was completely unable to rival this power. Pung! He smashed into the ground, forming a huge crater. Sunjin shakily crawled up. His fall hadn't been severe. However, the female knight had unleashed the power of regulations, causing his foot to feel incredibly frail and weak. Friend, at the very least, I'm also an elite from a celestial king tier force. Killing me will only cause endless troubles for you. These words sounded like a threat, yet he was instead begging for his life. The female knight in golden armor wore a haughty expression, and she said, "Is it the Thundercloud Palace? The Thundercloud Celestial King is nothing more than a first heaven celestial king. In the Rock Palace, his strength can't even rank in the top 100. If the Rock Palace hadn't been engaged in a battle with their mortal enemy, they would have had a total of more than 1,000 celestial kings during their peak. Of course, they only had 2 ninth heaven celestial kings. Right now, one of them had already passed away. Moreover, the Grand Elder had also suffered wounds of the Great Tao. As such, they could only wait for Hunyo to grow and fill this vacancy. Otherwise, once the powerful Grand Elder passed away, the powerful Rock Palace might collapse in an instant. Yet, even with their dire situation, was the Rock Palace a sect that could be provoked by a measly First Heaven Celestial King tier force? No way! What a joke! Sunjin was dumbfounded upon hearing this. Not only he, but everyone who heard the female knight's words was also dumbfounded. Only a single thought remained in their minds. You're fucking kidding me, right? Who didn't know that celestial kings were the most powerful beings in the entire world? It was also because of this that only very few celestial king tier forces existed in the world. As such, any one of them could easily rule over an entire territory. One just had to look at the Zai clan and the Thundercloud Palace. How many years had passed, yet which holy son or successor had advanced to become a celestial king? Not a single one. From this, one could imagine just how difficult it was to become a celestial king. Your sect has hundreds of celestial kings? Your flex has gone a little too far. You dare to humiliate our celestial king? Your fate is destined to be a miserable one, Sun Jin said coldly. He could die, but the Thundercloud celestial king couldn't be humiliated. He was the pillar of their hearts, and he was a totem of their minds. It's the simple truth, the female knight in golden armor said calmly. She swung her whip again, and it was as if mountains were collapsing and tsunamis were impending. The regulations lit up layer after layer. Sun Jin frantically fled into the distance. However, even with the help of his regulations of lightning, he still couldn't escape the fate of being struck by the female knight's whip. Although these strikes weren't deadly, he was still riddled with vicious wounds. He was finally unable to endure this anymore, and with a long battle cry, boundless radiance erupted from his body, causing him to transform into something like a small sundae. This was the glow of his secret palace, and Sun Jin was unleashing its full potential to forcefully raise his battle prowess. This would be his pinnacle battle. He was fighting with his life on the line. He had no option but to do so. However, the female knight in golden armor was completely unfazed by this. She casually swung her whip, and it was as if she were a cat toying with a mouse. Sun Jin was completely suppressed by her overwhelming might. The gulf between them was far too great, and it was as if they were on two completely different levels. In the end, Sun Jin completely exhausted the power of his secret palace. His battle prowess dropped significantly, and he was brutally whipped to death by the female knight. Another fifth secret elite was killed. Everyone shuddered in apprehension upon seeing this. They didn't dare to make a sound. "Ziwan, lend me your mount," the female knight in golden armor said as she looked at Ling Han. "As you wish, milady." A female knight in silver armor immediately jumped off her dragonhawk and climbed onto the back of someone else's. "Set off," the female knight in golden armor said as she looked at Ling Han. She still believed that Ling Han wasn't worthy of the young Imperial Empress. In fact, no one was worthy of the young Imperial Empress. Ling Han chuckled as he jumped onto the dragonhawk with the Empress. The back of this immortal beast was extremely large, so much so that one could even place a table on top of it. "Let's go!" the female knight in golden armor cried. The 10 dragonhawks soared into the air, and quickly became tiny black dots in the distance. Dragonhawks were extremely quick, and they were also extremely stable. There would be no turbulence at all. Ling Han embraced the Empress as he sat on its back. Even though there were strong winds, his physique was strong enough for him to completely ignore them. The female knight in golden armor couldn't help but feel slightly indignant. The young Imperial Empress was always longing for this bastard, yet he actually dared to embrace another woman before her? How beautiful! Even she couldn't help but admit that the Empress was stunningly beautiful. She was no less beautiful than the young Imperial Empress. How is this bastard so fortunate? The Dragonhawks were only at the Severing Mundane, yet in terms of long-distance travel, they were definitely one of the best choices. In 3 days they had already soared past thousands of mountains and rivers. At this rate, they could most likely reach the coast in around half a year. The celestial realm was far too large. Meanwhile, the Empress quickly entered the Black Tower. She had already reached the peak stage of the 3rd Severance, and she hoped to advance to the 4th Severance as soon as possible. She would then cultivate toward the true pinnacle for monarch tiers. The 5th Severance. Without reaching the 5th Severance, they wouldn't be able to compete against the successors of 7th Heaven Celestial King tier forces and above. Ling Han could only wait outside. Otherwise, if he also entered the Black Tower, heavens knew where the winds would blow them to. Thus, it was best for him to remain put. In the blink of an eye, 3 months had already passed. Everything had been peaceful, and no conflict had occurred. The female knight in golden armor had remained aloof toward Ling Han the entire time, and it was clear that she wasn't willing to say anything extra to him. However, she had still told Ling Han that her surname was Guan. He could refer to her as Commander Guan. As for her name, she hadn't told him. Ling Han hadn't asked either. Today was a beautiful and sunny day. In different regions of the celestial realm, there would be different elites using their magnificent power to create suns and moons. They would forcefully create a cycle of day and night. The sun in this region was red and bright. Generally speaking, only ascending origin tier elites had the power to achieve this. Ling Han stared at the red sun. This sun possessed powerful regulations of fire, and it caused his fire element divine fetus to itch with yearning. He felt a strong urge to extract the regulations from this sun so that he could study and comprehend them. Of course, he could only think about this. To say nothing of whether he could withstand the fury of an ascending origin tier elite or not, his current cultivation level meant that he couldn't extract the regulations from this sun anyway. The gulf between their cultivation levels was far too great. Even with his fire element divine fetus, he would still be instantly incinerated into ashes by the regulations of this Sunday. This sun was colossal in size, and it was as large as an entire city. How large was the city of the celestial realm? Right at this moment, an expanse of dark clouds suddenly rolled over from the distance. It was as if a formidable tsunami were surging over. In the blink of an eye, that colossal red sun was instantly swallowed by the dark clouds. The blazing flames flashed for a brief moment, yet it soon vanished without a trace. After a short moment, a violent explosion ripped through the clouds, with a burst of red heat waves hurtling toward Ling Han and the others. The colossal red sun had been obliterated. Chapter 1847 I'm just passing by. Chapter 1847 I'm just passing by. Not good! Commander Guan exclaimed. She always appeared emotionless, yet her expression suddenly changed drastically. This is a battle between ascending origin tier elites. Hurry up and avoid it. There was no need for her reminder, as all of the female knights were experienced cultivators who had been through hundreds of battles. They were already commanding their Dragahawks to turn around. However, Ling Han had little experience in riding Dragahawks, and he had been blindly following the others these past few months. Even so, his Dragahawk wasn't foolish. It had reached the severing mundane tier, so its intelligence naturally wasn't low. With a screech, it flapped its wings and turned around to follow its companions. In the end, however, reactiveness was no match for proactiveness. Although they had only been slower by 2 wing beats, how far could a Dragahawk travel in a single wing beat? At least dozens of kilometers. Thus, Commander Guan and the others instantly transformed into tiny black dots in the distance. Boom! 2 bursts of shock waves traveled over from before him. No, they had traveled over from behind him. One shock wave was black like dark clouds, while the other was red like blazing flames. Both of these shock waves blotted out heaven and earth, stretching as far as the eye could see. These shock waves caught up to him at an incredible speed, and they were even faster than his Dragahawk. By the looks of it, these shock waves were going to strike him at any moment. The Dragahawk beneath Ling Han suddenly screeched in terror. It furiously beat its wings, yet it was unable to escape from the shock waves no matter what. After all, how could its speed compare to that of ascending origin tier elites? Whoosh! Right at this moment, a whip suddenly lashed over from the distance, and wrapped around the Dragahawk. This was none other than the weapon of Commander Guan. She was going to pull the Dragahawk and Ling Han toward her. However, the 2 bursts of devastating and unstoppable shock waves had already arrived. Pa pa pa! Commander Guan's whip was instantly reduced to ashes. She was completely unable to rival these shock waves. She wanted to charge back, yet upon seeing the 2 bursts of furious and formidable shock waves, she could only grit her teeth and turn back around. In her eyes, Ling Han definitely couldn't withstand these shock waves. He would definitely be reduced to ashes. The remaining Dragahawks beat their wings in unison as they fled into the distance. So what if they had come from a 9th heaven celestial king tier force in the Rock Palace? Right now, they could do nothing but flee. During such critical times, one could only rely on their own strength. They couldn't rely on their background. Anyhow, when the two bursts of furious shock waves surged over, Ling Han immediately grabbed the screeching dragonhawk and knocked it unconscious. He then dragged it into the Black Tower. This was an easy task, so he naturally wouldn't watch the dragonhawk die. Boom! Devastating auras and regulations churned through the sky. Even inside the Black Tower, Ling Han could still clearly see the stunning scenes in the outside world. Although they weren't powerful enough to threaten the Black Tower, they were still powerful enough to make Ling Han feel a strong sense of apprehension. If he were forced to face these shock waves head-on, he would be instantly reduced to ashes even if he actively channeled the indestructible Heaven's Scroll. Rumble. Violent auras boomed through the sky, with the power of regulations transforming into countless blades that mercilessly soared through the air, destroying everything in their paths. Ling Han couldn't help but lament his bad luck. Whom had he provoked? He was simply traveling toward his destination. Anyhow, it was clear that these ascending origin tier elites weren't targeting them. Otherwise, even Commander Guan wouldn't have been able to escape the fate of being insta-killed. It was extremely likely that two ascending origin tier elites were battling against each other, and they had unfortunately been caught up in the crossfire. Ling Han casually tossed the dragonhawk aside before starting to carefully reflect on his actions. He hadn't done anything bad recently, had he? That being the case, why had he suddenly been struck with such great misfortune? Was he truly a magnet for trouble? He silently waited for a conclusion. The two elites couldn't battle forever, could they? However, things were truly developing in this direction. Outside the Black Tower, the power of regulations transformed into deadly blades that continued to wantonly shoot through the sky. These were blades that could easily kill Immortal Palace tier elites. The battle lasted several months, and Ling Han couldn't see things clearly from within the Black Tower. He could only sense that this was indeed a battle between two profoundly powerful elites. Please hurry up and finish your battle. I still need to hurry on with my journey, Ling Han said with a sigh. Although he had the company of the Empress and the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and although there were still two kids for him to tease, he truly wanted to reunite with Hunyo, his parents, as well as the others. He wanted to see his own son. Ah! How old was his son now? Perhaps he already had great-great-grandchildren. Fox Demon, you've already destroyed my ancient sun city, yet you're still not willing to let the matter drop? A man who was enveloped in flames roared loudly. His voice boomed like thunder, and it was clear that he was beside himself with fury. There was a war hammer in his hands, and it was burning with purple flames that were powerful enough to easily incinerate Fifth Secret elites. Lu Lingfeng, you've yearned for my inner core, and you took advantage of my seclusion to launch a sneak attack on me. You almost ruined my cultivation of hundreds of millions of years. How can I calm down if I don't kill you? This was a woman who was dressed in red silk robes. Her true appearance was hidden behind the aura of the Great Tao, so it couldn't be seen clearly. Anyhow, her figure was extremely slender and shapely, and it was as alluring as could be. It was the battle between these two elites that had directly obliterated the colossal red sun in the sky. It was also their battle that had forced Ling Han to remain inside the Black Tower. The hair of Lu Lingfeng, the man who was wielding the war hammer, stood on ends. Each strand was burning with flames, and his dignified face was also burning with fury. Just like the woman in red had said, he had been yearning for her inner core. He had launched a sneak attack while she had been cultivating in seclusion, and he had wanted to snatch her fruits of cultivation to strengthen himself. However, he hadn't expected the woman to set up so many barriers and traps. In the end, he had come away empty-handed. Not only that, but the woman in red had also charged over to his city to seek revenge. She had destroyed the colossal red sun with a single strike, and she had instantly reduced his main city to nothingness. He was naturally enraged. Although the city wasn't the ancestral grounds of the Lu clan, it was a city that he had spent countless years building and developing. However, it had been destroyed just like that. How could he not be infuriated? Fox Demon, die! He roared. He swung his war hammer at the woman, forcing her to continually shoot back and retreat. Sparks of flames transformed into meteors that continued to rain down on the earth, causing a colossal crater to appear in the ground. This was the power of ascending origin tier elites. With a wave of their hands, they could easily obliterate heaven and earth. They were unfathomably powerful. "Shameless bastard!" the woman in red roared in fury. She had been cultivating in peace, so whom had she provoked? Yet this man had actually lusted after her inner core, and almost ruined her cultivation of hundreds of millions of years. If she didn't kill Lu Lingfeng, she wouldn't be able to swallow her anger. Under the effects of their intense battle, all of the towering mountains in the surroundings were raised and turned into flat earth. Moreover, there were deep craters everywhere, and they had even been connected together to form a gigantic sea. This battle lasted for a whopping 4 months, and both of the powerful elites suffered relatively severe wounds. Only then did their battle finally conclude. The elites both retreated, yet the animosity between them naturally wouldn't be resolved any time soon. Ling Han finally exited the Black Tower. He couldn't help but chuckle bitterly. Right now, he was heaven knew how far away from Commander Guan. Because this region had already been smashed into flat earth and transformed into a sea of flames, he more so couldn't ascertain his own position. He had no option but to slowly search for Commander Guan and the others. The flames were scorching, and even with his fire element divine fetus and his 9 heavens flame, Ling Han was still unable to freely move around this area. The gulf between him and ascending origin tier elites was far too great. He would be seeking death if he dared to enter their battleground. As such, he had no option but to take a detour around their battleground. However, just how gigantic was the Sea of Flames? It would take him at least an entire month to walk around it. "Lu Lingfeng, you bastard!" Ling Han gritted his teeth and cursed. If it weren't for this person lusting over that woman's inner core, would he have attracted such furious revenge from her? Would he have been dragged into such an intense battle? Meanwhile, Ling Han had been mysteriously caught up in their mess. If he couldn't meet up with Commander Guan, his journey to the Western Celestial Realm and his reunion with Hu Niu and the others would definitely be delayed by a very long time. Chapter 1848 I Can Even Cause Trouble by Eating Meat. Chapter 1848 I Can Even Cause Trouble by Eating Meat. "Commander, we've already been searching for him for more than half a year." "Perhaps," a female knight in silver armor said to Commander Guan in hesitation. Since their separation with Ling Han, they had been searching for his whereabouts this entire time, although they had already come to a conclusion in their minds. In the face of such furious shock waves, Ling Han had definitely been killed. However, just how much did Hu Niu long for Ling Han? They naturally couldn't give up just because they couldn't find him. Thus, they all worked hard to search for him every single day. However, they all knew that Ling Han had definitely died. It was just that no one wanted to bring this up first. Commander Guan fell silent for a moment. She then retrieved some materials and constructed a mini formation. With this done, she retrieved a piece of pitch-black rock. She wore a pained expression, yet she still gritted her teeth and placed the rock inside the formation. The formation instantly lit up. Like a mirror, a figure then appeared before them. This was an indescribably beautiful woman who was filled with liveliness and vigor. She immediately jumped over, and she asked, "Have you found Niu's Ling Han?" Upon seeing her excitement, Commander Guan couldn't help but start to shed cold sweat. She paused for a moment before replying, "Young Imperial Empress, your subordinate indeed found Ling Han." "Where is he? Where's Ling Han?" Hu Niu asked and looked around. She didn't possess the dignity and reservedness of a successor of a 9th Heaven Celestial King tier force at all. It was all the fault of this man. Fortunately, he had died. Although the young Imperial Empress would feel depressed for a while, she would eventually overcome this sadness. "Young Imperial Empress, we came across a battle between 2 elites while we were returning. We were caught up in the shock waves, and Ling Han suffered the misfortune of being struck by them," Commander Guan said as she gritted her teeth. Hu Niu faltered for a moment before flaring up in rage and shouting, "Nonsense! How can Niu's Ling Han die? Hurry up and find Ling Han back for Niu!" Otherwise, I'll feed you to a dog bear. Cold sweat trickled down Commander Guan's forehead. Ling Han had already died, so how could she find him back? However, Hunyo was certain that Ling Han hadn't died. She knew about the existence of the Black Tower, and after becoming mature, she had looked into the origin of the Black Tower. She had discovered some clues, so she was certain that Ling Han couldn't have been killed so easily. Anyhow, Ling Han hasn't died. Find him for Neo. If you don't find him, then don't even think about returning, she said angrily. A thought suddenly flashed through her mind, and she said, No, Neo is personally going to look for him. Neo doesn't feel reassured leaving these matters to you. And those sh*TTY elites and whatnot. They can also wait for Neo. Neo will definitely blast them into smithereens. Young Imperial Empress, you can't. Apart from Commander Guan, even the female knights in silver armor hurriedly started to discourage Hu Neo. It was far too significant for the young Imperial Empress to leave. What if their mortal enemies learned of this and ambushed them halfway? Commander Guan knelt down on one knee, and said with confidence, Rest assured, young Imperial Empress. We'll definitely find Ling Han. Even if Ling Han had truly died, she was still prepared to wander around for a few 100,000 years. She would definitely prevent the young Imperial Empress from leaving until she succeeded in cultivation. However, Hu Neo angrily shook her head, and said, No, no, no! Neo doesn't feel reassured by you people. Neo is going to personally look for Ling Han. Commander Guan and the others immediately started to wipe the cold sweat from their brows. In terms of troublemaking, this young Imperial Empress could seemingly rank first. Moreover, even though Commander Guan possessed a superior cultivation level, the hierarchical order of the Rock Palace was extremely strict. In any case, the title of young Imperial Empress didn't simply signify that Hu Neo was a potential successor. It was only because her cultivation level was still low that there was a young before her title. However, she would definitely become the Imperial Empress in the future. There would be no other option. Did they dare to scold Hu Neo? Anyhow, the Grand Elder most likely wouldn't allow the young Imperial Empress to muck around, right? With this in mind, they didn't try to discourage Hu Neo anymore. We'll keep searching. Since the young Imperial Empress insists, we'll do everything that we can. Ling Han slowly strolled around. Right now, the Empress was cultivating in seclusion in order to advance to the fourth severance. Even with the help of the reincarnation tree, this would most likely still take an extremely long amount of time. She wouldn't be coming out of the Black Tower anytime soon. How can I find Commander Guan and the others? It was almost impossible to coincidentally come across the right person in the Celestial Realm. After all, the Celestial Realm was far too large. Thus, he had to make himself become more noticeable. He had to cause some commotion. That way, Commander Guan and the others would perhaps hear news of him, and find their way over. Of course, this was on the premise that they still believed he was alive. Then I'll go to the nearest city first. If Commander Guan isn't stupid, she'll most likely think of this possibility as well. The chance of coming across her in the wilderness is far too small. If I enter a city, however, I can ask around for some information. This region had already been raised into flat earth. Thus, he couldn't find anyone to ask where the nearest city was. That being the case, he could only randomly pick a direction. After walking for 7 days, he was still traveling through forests and grasslands. There was no sign of civilization. He sniffed slightly, and he could smell an alluring aroma. As a glutton and an alchemist, he was certain that this was the smell of a 3-stone deer being roasted. Moreover, it had been marinated with at least 13 different spices. Among these spices were 3 extremely high-level medicinal ingredients. Ling Han involuntarily walked toward the source of this aroma. He entered a small forest, only to see a man currently sitting on a rock in a patch of empty land. There was a campfire before him, and there was a piece of meat roasting above this fire. It gave off an appetizing aroma. The man turned around upon hearing Ling Han approach. He was slightly robust, and even when sitting down, he was still half a head taller than most ordinary people. He was extremely handsome, and he more so possessed an air of composure about him. Judging from his appearance, he was at most in his early 20s. Of course, age was insignificant in the celestial realm. However, this person's flame of life was still extremely lively and vigorous. Thus, he definitely wouldn't be too old. However, it was clear that he hadn't expected anyone to come. There was a hint of astonishment on his face. "Friend, can you share some of your food?" Ling Han shamelessly asked. As a glutton, being overly familiar with strangers was naturally a necessary skill. The young man faltered for a brief moment before smiling and casually waving his hand. "Be my guest!" He secretly gave a signal. Ling Han saw this, yet he didn't expose the young man. Instead, he sat down and retrieved a small knife to cut off a piece of roast meat. He then started to chow down on it. "Delicious!" he praised. The young man smiled faintly. He retrieved a bottle of wine and handed it to Ling Han. His smile was extremely meaningful. Ling Han accepted the bottle of wine and gladly chugged it down. He then ate some more roast meat. His entire body felt satisfied and relaxed. "Young master!" At this instant, 7 people suddenly ran over from different directions. They all kneeled down on one knee to greet the young man. However, when they saw Ling Han, they couldn't help but feel astonished. The young man's surname was Liu, and he was called Liu Xianming. As he gazed at Ling Han, his expression gradually became baleful. "Friend, there's no need to act anymore. Where's Chen Si? Did you kill him, or did you knock him unconscious?" He was resting here, and he had commanded his 8 subordinates to spread apart to guard 8 different directions. Yet, Ling Han had suddenly appeared, and Chen Si, the person who had been responsible for guarding that direction, hadn't returned. It was extremely obvious what had happened. Ling Han was astonished. He then started to perform a deep reflection of his actions. He was definitely a magnet for trouble. He had simply been attracted here by the aroma of meat, yet he was still caught up in some kind of trouble. Fuck. Chapter 1849 I'm a very easygoing person. Chapter 1849 I'm a very easygoing person. Ling Han broke into a grin and said, "Don't misunderstand. I am only passing by, and have not seen anyone. I will leave once I'm finished eating." Liu Xianming smirked coldly and said, "Since you are so stubborn, apprehend him." He still wanted to find out what had happened to his subordinate. Thus, he did not issue the command to kill Ling Han. "Yes." The 7 subordinates obeyed, immediately moving to surround Ling Han. Ling Han continued to eat, and said, "I really have no malicious intent. Your person may have seen a pretty girl pass by, and thus followed her. What does it have to do with me? Don't be so flippant." The 7 people charged over, all drawing their weapons, and blazing with killing intent. Ling Han was completely unconcerned. These people were all only in the severing mundane tier. To say nothing of the fact that they were only normal severances, even if they were king tiers, or even emperor tiers, he would not be afraid in the slightest. The 7 people besieged him, while Ling Han only dodged. After all, he had eaten their food, so he had to give them some courtesy. Furthermore, he also discovered that he had been screwed over by someone else. Chen Si must have been killed. Even if he hadn't died, he would not have been much better off, either. That was why he could easily make his way here. But the culprit clearly did not bear any good intentions towards Liu Xianming. He had deliberately allowed him to come here, so his motive could not be any clearer. He was bait, used to attract the attention of these 7 guards, and as for later. Xiao! A flash of sword light suddenly rose up from under the ground, lifting sword chi that was a whole 3,000 meters long. A murderous aura spread out, as if a prehistoric wild beast was born. This was an assassin who had used an unknown method to approach. Even Ling Han had not discovered that he had been lying in ambush all the while here, and the other party had taken this prime opportunity to unleash an attack. Liu Xianming humphed, his expression showing his thoughts, as expected. One was in the open to draw attention, while the other would be launching a sneak attack from the shadows. Did they think such tricks could fool him? Shua, a sword slashed over. There were multiple deep green patterns on the sword's blade that had been soaked in strong poison, and were about to become symbols of great Tao. To say nothing of an open wound, even mere contact with the skin would be deadly. Lu Xianming made his move. With a clink, a crescent blade had appeared in his hands, and blocked this blow. A strong clash of regulations took place, and they instantly swept out wildly towards the surroundings like a tsunami. Tang, tang, tang. Lu Xianming couldn't help but retreat continuously. The other's battle prowess was very strong. At least, he was not much inferior to himself. Just at this moment, Shua, another flash of sword light actually shot out from the ground. A figure also appeared behind it, controlling its blade to pierce Lu Xianming's back. This blow was really very timely and on the spot. This was precisely the instant when Lu Xianming's defenses were at their weakest. Humph! Yet Lu Xianming was completely unruffled. With the point of his right hand, an aura of light immediately appeared, forming a shield around him. Pun! When the sword light arrived, it was blocked by the shield of light, but as the second sneak attacker shouted a battle cry, the sneak attack's power instantly soared 100 times over. Innumerable cracks appeared on the shield of light, and then it shattered and crumbled. Scram! Lu Xianming had already gotten his breath back, and the crescent blade in his hand struck out. The second sneak attacker's feet tapped lightly on the ground, and his figure retreated, dodging this blow. Shua, a third flash of sword light rose up, and this time, it had shot out from Lu Xianming's left side. A third sneak attacker popped out. This time, Lu Xianming's expression really changed. 1 time, 2 times, and now 3 was his limit. Though the last 2 sneak attacks seemed to have taken a long time, they had actually happened at almost the same time. Even if Lu Xianming was a prodigy of cultivation, he had still used up all his tricks in the face of these 2 sharp sneak attacks. And now, his origin power had not recovered yet, while his protective measures were used up, but a fatal blade was again piercing towards him. He knew what kind of sword this was. Shattering spirit herb was rubbed on the blades, and if one was stabbed with it, not only would the physical body be destroyed, even the spirit would in fact be immediately corroded. It really was incredibly vicious. Was there no way for him to escape from this crisis? Looking at the blazing sword light, and how it had arrived at his chest, a bitter feeling rose up in Lu Xianming's heart. Coming from the same roots, why are you in such a rush to kill me? Hey, hey, hey! You guys can go ahead and kill each, and I won't care about that, but don't use me like a shield to bear the blame for you guys. With a flash, Ling Han had already stepped in front of Lu Xianming, and stretched out a hand to grab the poisoned sword. Don't touch it, there's poison! Lu Xianming hurriedly communicated this message through divine sense. Verbal communication clearly wouldn't make it in time. Ling Han merely acted as if he had not heard. He had grabbed the sword's blade in one go and said, I'm talking to you here. Don't you know that it is very impolite to ignore the questions of others, especially when this person is your victim at that? Die! The third sneak attacker's eyes flickered with viciousness. To actually grab the poisoned sword with a bare hand, you clearly are dead. Who asked you to insist on barging in and ruining their business? Just as it looked like their target was about to be killed, but someone actually came in and interfered. If they didn't kill you, how were they supposed to vent their hatred? Kill! The other 2 sneak attackers also returned in attack. All of them were filled with anger towards Ling Han. Initially, this was a perfectly flawless assassination, but now all their efforts had come to nothing just because of an outsider. If they had known that this would have been the result, they really wouldn't have used him as bait. The 7 guards immediately charged back after a moment of being stunned. This time, they naturally were not charging towards Ling Han. How are you completely fine? The third sneak attacker stared at Ling Han dumbly. Are you a monster? Your bare hand is holding a poisoned sword, and you are actually completely unscathed. Ling Han wore a strange expression, and countered. Why wouldn't I be completely fine? Do you know how to chat here? Cursing someone with death the moment you open your mouth, nobody does that. Holy fuck! The third sneak attacker was about to go crazy. How could there be someone like this? Are you an idiot? He hurriedly pulled his sword and retreated. There was no point to drag things out with this weirdo. The priority here was Lu Xianming. Lu Xianming. Ling Han's hand burned with the nine heavens flame. This was celestial king tier level entity, and with the support of such great Tao, how could the poison possibly infiltrate his body? He gripped the sword, as immovable as a mountain, so how could the other man manage to draw his sword back? Hey, don't be so excited. Just see how I, the victim, aren't excited, so I have no idea what you are so anxious about. Ling Han appeared calm and unruffled. Come, give me an explanation. Why did you throw the blame on me? Is it because you thought that I am an easy target to bully? You are an easy target to bully? Easy to bully Maya's asterisk. The third sneak attack presently really wanted to cry but had no tears. They really shouldn't have trifled with Ling Han. This was essentially a maniac, and was a maniac that was incredibly strong at that. The battle royale began. The two sneak attackers stood against the 7 guards. Putting aside the matter of the art of assassination, these two sneak attackers really weren't all that strong. Their strength lay in unleashing a deadly blow once they had snuck near enough to their target. Once it became a head-on confrontation, their strength was just that. Lu Xianming did not make a move. He merely watched that farce-like conversation between Ling Han and the third attacker. I am a very easygoing person. As long as you compensate me with something like godly metal, of course, it has to be level 20. I will also accept pseudo-divine metal, then I can write off what happened just now, Ling Han said with utmost seriousness. My dear friend, help me apprehend these 3 people, and I will offer you a satisfactory payment. Lu Xianming suddenly spoke up. No, we too will be willing to make an offer. The third sneak attacker hurriedly called out. He already had a deep understanding of Ling Han's strength. Merely the magnificent feat of him grabbing the poisoned blade with his bare hand had already scared him out of his wits. Chapter 1850 An Unconventional Auction. Chapter 1850 An Unconventional Auction. Ling Han nodded. Then, let's begin the auction. Come, make your bid, don't be reserved. Was there an auction like this? To say nothing of the fact that the 3 sneak attackers were all gritting their teeth, even Lu Xianming's expression was a little strange. He had indeed met a considerable number of eccentrics and unusual characters, but this was the first time he had met someone like Ling Han. 1 million star stones! However, Lu Xianming still spoke up immediately. 1 million star stones was an exorbitant sum anywhere, but he had said it very casually and easily, as if that wasn't 1 million star stones, but only a pile of rubble. The third sneak attacker immediately broke out in a cold sweat. In a competition of wealth, how was he to compete with the holy son of Alchemy City? However, he still shouted, 10 million! Ling Han looked suspiciously at him, and asked, Hey, do you know what punishment will be given for malicious bidding? The third sneak attacker hurriedly explained, As long as you kill him, we can use his head to trade for endless wealth. To say nothing of 10 million, even a 100 million or a billion would be no hard feat. Hearing these words, Lu Xianming frowned slightly. It was indeed as the other said. His life was very valuable, whether dead or alive. Ling Han couldn't help but feel amused. I really couldn't tell that you are actually a smart one. However, since that guy's head is so valuable, why should I not take it and turn it in by myself, but insist on having you do the job? That's because you have no idea whom you should look for. That person called out, and actually seemed a little proud. Your words are quite logical. Ling Han nodded, and this caused the expressions of Lu Xianming and his 7 subordinates to shift. They had really feared that Ling Han would agree. Though Ling Han hadn't really made a move, merely his current action was frightening enough. No one would want to push him towards the other side and become their enemy. Sir, you do not yet know who my young master is, right? A guard asked, revealing Lu Xianming's identity. My young master, Lu Xianming, is one of the 11 holy sons of Alchemy City, and is the man who has the highest chance of inheritance. Alchemy City, a 4-star force, and further, we are not an ordinary 4-star force either. Our Alchemy City has gathered more than 90% of the alchemists in the Eastern Celestial Realm. It can be said that in the whole Celestial Realm, at least 40% of all alchemical pills have come from the hands of our Alchemy City. Oh, so they happen to be alchemists. A thought flashed in Ling Han's head, and he had an understanding. He asked, "The three of you have probably been sent by Lu Xianming's competitors, right?" When it involved a contest of power, it had always been cruel and ruthless. Even members of the same family could possibly turn hostile against one another. And this was something that Ling Han had experienced deeply long ago in the small world. It was not all that different in the Celestial Realm, either. From a small world to the Celestial Realm, the only thing that had changed was strength, and the unchanging factor was human will. Those three did not answer, which was equivalent to having given tacit admission. Ling Han did not take it to heart, and said, "The fact that you are having internal strife in your own clan has nothing to do with me. However, I have never developed the habit of using the lives of innocents to make profit. You all had best just hand over whatever you have in your pockets. We are but strangers coming together by chance, and I will leave immediately, so forgive me for not accepting credit." "Sir, could it be that you have not heard clearly? Our young master is a holy son of Alchemy City." A guard couldn't help but exclaim loudly, reminding Ling Han. The holy son of Alchemy City had many alchemists under his command that he could mobilize, and how many contacts did every alchemist have? This was an incredibly frightening number. It could be said that the chairperson of Alchemy City was definitely the top person beneath celestial kings. No other 4-star force would dare to trifle with them, and in terms of wealth, the only other force that could compare with them was the massive military pavilion. Though you are very strong, you are still only a third severance. If it was not for the fact that this is a unique situation, what need would there be for us to curry favor with you? Ling Han turned and looked at that person, dissatisfaction on his face. "I am doing business here, and you are crashing my party?" He pressed down a palm, and that guard instantly collapsed onto the ground, his forehead covered with cold sweat. Too frightening. Though he had not been injured, an extremely domineering aura was practically enough to scare him out of his wits. Ling Han withdrew his gaze, and broke into a grin, saying, "Come, let's continue." This time, everyone did not fight further. Ling Han's strength was enough to overwhelm everything. He only had to lean slightly towards one side, and then that side would be able to gain an absolute victory, so what was the point of further fighting? Lu Xianming frowned as well. He had not brought many star stones with him on this trip, and he feared that he would not be able to win out over those three. Pa. Both sides began to collect their wealth. Multiple star stones and godly metal were taken out of their spatial god tools, and respectively piled up on either side. Unfortunately, Ling Han was doing a real-time valuation there as well, so neither side dared to relax, and they were taking out all their valuables as much as they could. To be honest, those 7 guards really didn't have much wealth. The majority depended completely on Lu Xianming, and the 3 sneak attackers were assassins, but had accumulated a considerable amount of wealth. Thus, who would actually come out on top in the competition between both sides was actually hard to determine. "Go! Go!" Ling Han cheered both sides on, causing Lu Xianming and the 3 assassins to almost gain a feeling of unity against a common enemy. "Can you not want to make an easy profit like this? Could you have some consideration for our feelings?" As time passed, their movements to take things out slowed down gradually. That was because they really couldn't find anything else valuable even after a thorough search. When both sides were completely unable to take anything else out, Ling Han looked towards the 3 assassins, and smilingly said, "Congratulations. You have won in this competition. And do you have some words of thanks to say?" "You have really screwed us over," the 3 assassins said internally. These really were words of utmost sincerity from them. Though they had won this competition, they had emptied out all their savings as well. This was a definite loss for them. Thankfully, once they killed Lu Xianming, they would be able to earn a little back at least. Meanwhile, Lu Xianming's expression shifted slightly, while his 7 subordinates were extremely furious. They each gripped their weapons tightly, standing guard around Lu Xianming. Ling Han nodded and said, "You guys can scram." The 3 assassins faltered. "Didn't we win? Why are you telling us to scram? This is your compensation for my loss. When have I agreed to help you kill anyone?" Ling Han glared at them. "Scram quickly, or I will start a new auction." When the 3 assassins heard this, their faces immediately turned green, and they hurriedly broke into a run. They swore internally. They were determined not to meet Ling Han again in this lifetime. And this shouldn't be a vow, but rather a prayer. After all, if it was just them vowing, it would not be of use. Lu Xianming and his group finally sighed in relief, but their faces immediately turned green because not only did Ling Han stow away the property of the 3 assassins, he did not spare even theirs. "Sir, you..." A guard couldn't help but call out. "Why are you taking our stuff too?" Ling Han glared at him, and said, "Don't you know the rules? Could it be that I have not saved the life of your young master, so shouldn't I accept a little reward for it? Who do you guys think I am? The saintly celestial king?" The 7 guards were instantly rendered speechless. Only now did they know how ruthless Ling Han was. He was basically taking from both sides. Yet Lu Xianming rubbed his hands and laughed loudly, saying, "My dear friend, you are truly a unique character. Dare I ask how I should address you?" "Ling Han." Ling Han casually replied as he continued to stow everything away into the Black Tower. "Brother Ling, are you willing to work for me? As for rewards, just name the price," Lu Xianming said proudly. He did indeed have such confidence. Alchemy City was definitely the wealthiest 4-star force in the whole world, and even the massive military pavilion could fall behind them, flabbergasted. The latter could only just barely compare to the former. Chapter 1851 Old Bastard. Chapter 1851 Old Bastard. Ling Han chuckled and said, "Really just name the price?" "Go ahead," Lu Xianming said, similarly with a smile. Though he was an alchemy prodigy, he also had outstanding accomplishments in martial arts, and was a king-tier himself. But he speculated that he was far from Ling Han's level in martial arts. Thus, he was of a mind to recruit him. If this kind of prodigy was working for him, his status would be even more secured. In a contest among holy sons like them, they were allowed to make a move on each other, but it definitely had to be between equals and cultivation level. Otherwise, if they breached the rules of the sect, not only would their status as holy son be stripped, they would even be executed. A contest was a contest, and rules were rules. They were not allowed to mess around. Ling Han was invincible among his peers, so before he ascended to the apex, the former could become his absolute helping hand. Ling Han thought for a moment, and said, "Then I won't be greedy either. For example, Celestial King tier techniques, give me 10. As well as source powers, the likes of 5 elements, slaughter, time, just give me 1 of each." Lu Xianming's initially smiling expression immediately turned green, and he also felt humiliated and angry. "Are you joking with me? Celestial King tier technique? How could a 4-star force possibly have a Celestial King tier technique? And 10 at that? And there was source powers too. That thing was even rarer than Celestial Kings, and to offer 1 of each? Why don't you just fly while you are at it?" People said the price asked for was as high as heaven, while the offering price was as low as the earth. But Ling Han's first offer was really so high that he could not even open his mouth. Even if he bargained the price down to 1 Celestial King tier technique and 1 source power, so what? Was he able to pay the price? Ling Han smiled slightly and said, "You can't even satisfy such low requests? Sigh, forget it, I had best ask others." He stowed away the stuff on the ground, and grabbed a piece of roast meat while he was at it. With a wave of his hand, he strode off. If it was not for the fact that he had eaten their food, and screwed them over too, he couldn't be bothered to involve himself in this kind of murderous enmity. How could it be that Lu Xianming was an absolute good guy? Looking at his figure that gradually disappeared from sight, Lu Xianming and his subordinates finally relaxed. After all, Ling Han was really too strong. With him there, they felt as if there was a stone weighing down on their hearts, and felt greatly pained. "Young master, this person is too arrogant. When we return, should we find a few people to?" one of his subordinates said, making a slicing motion with his hand. Lu Xianming swept a stern look on him, and darkly said, "No matter what, he has still saved our lives, so how could we return kindness with ingratitude? Do you all think that my life is worth just that little bit? We dare not!" The 7 guards all half-knelt reverently. "When we next meet, I hope you will not refuse me again." Lu Xianming withdrew his gaze, and recovered his confident and calm composure. With a wave of his hand, his eyes were extremely grim and solemn. "Let's go!" Though he wanted to be kind-hearted, the ambush this time had caused his heart to completely harden. The contest of heirs was destined to be irreconcilable. He could not afford to be merciful any longer, or he would only be giving up his own life. Ling Han was very pleased. Though he seemed to have a knack for attracting trouble, he had also obtained a large pile of star stones and godly metal because of it, which made him very happy. Humming a tune, he suddenly felt an incredibly strange feeling, like even his heart was sinking. "Kaka, lad!" Amidst a series of cackles, an elder appeared by his side. He was really very old, appearing to be in his 70s, all his hair gray, and more than half of his teeth missing too, looking like he was close to death. However, Ling Han did not dare to think that the other party was weak in the slightest bit. He had a feeling that his elder was even stronger than Commander Guan. Commander Guan was already a 5th secret elite, and a 5th secret elite that had walked out from a 9th heaven celestial king tier level force at that. Then, this elder definitely had to be in the ascending origin tier. "What advice do you have for me, senior?" Ling Han was not able to flee. The others Qi had completely locked down on him. Once he had the slightest intention to flee, the other man would definitely move without the slightest hesitation. And even in that instant when he dodged into the Black Tower, he would not be spared. The ascending origin tier was too strong, they were the strongest beneath Celestial King tier. The old man laughed loudly, clapped a hand on Ling Han's shoulder, and said, "Lad, your temperament is really steady. If any other person was scared like this by me, they would probably either turn around and flee, or be shivering with fear. Ho ho, thank you for senior's praise." Ling Han frowned slightly because he realized that when the elder had clapped his shoulder, some unknown regulations had also been sent into his body. It was definitely nothing good. The elder withdrew his hand and said, "What I have sent into your body is named Black Murderous Curse, and is my unique trick. Without me dispelling it for you, even if several hundred ascending origin tiers made their move together, it would be useless." He crooked his finger a few times, and Ling Han's expression immediately changed. He could feel his heart shrink suddenly and harshly, as if a net was tightly wrapped around it, squeezing it so hard that he felt incredible pain. Ling Han was internally furious, but he did not panic, and darkly asked, "This junior thinks I have not done senior any offense, so why has senior planted such a technique on me? Kaka, I want you to do something for me, but fear that you will not do your best, so I can only use some means first to prevent you from forgetting." The elder cackled. When one had reached a height that he had, he naturally would not be concerned about the attitudes of others. If he did not like anyone, he only had to erase him. Of course, he presently wanted Ling Han to do something for him, so even if he disliked him, he would temporarily tolerate him. For a mighty figure like himself, this kind of patience was not a big deal. Ling Han's heart calmed. Since he wanted him to do something, then he temporarily wouldn't be in any danger. He asked, "May I know what senior wants me to do?" "Steal something," the elder said smilingly. "My name is Blood Shadow Demon, but the majority call me Old Demon Blood Shadow, and I, too, like this name. Hee, I am only an old demon." Ling Han was speechless. This old bastard did not feel this was an insult at all, so even if this insult was thrown into his face, it was useless. "What do you want me to steal, and where is it?" Old Demon Blood Shadow looked at Ling Han admiringly. "If it was not for the fact that I am so determined to obtain that item, I really could not bear to have you take the risk, brat." So calm and composed, I would really like to treasure your talent. He paused slightly. There seems to be something in your body, brat. Forget it, proper business is more important. Ling Han couldn't help but feel his heart clench. Ascending origin tiers could not discover the existence of the Black Tower, the Nine Heavens Flame, and the likes with a single glance, but upon direct skin contact, they would immediately discover something was off. Thankfully, the old bastard was more anxious about stealing something. Otherwise, should he carefully examine in closer detail, he would at least be able to discover the Nine Heavens Flame and Xianyin Source Water. Those were source powers, and even Celestial King Tears would be tempted. The old bastard would definitely kill him without the slightest hesitation, and take them for his own. I want you to enter into Alchemy City, and steal the 2 natural peach seals there for me. Finally, old Demon Blood Shadow announced his demand. Ling Han. This was really too much of a coincidence, wasn't it? Ling Han wanted to achieve 5th severance, so he had to obtain the natural peach seal. Otherwise, once the heavenly tribulation struck him, there would be absolutely no way he could survive. And so coincidentally, the old bastard wanted him to steal the natural peach seal. Moreover, Ling Han had just encountered the Holy Son of Alchemy City, and now the old bastard wanted him to sneak into Alchemy City. Senior has probably witnessed that farce previously, right? Ling Han asked smilingly. The old bastard should have no idea that he, too, wanted to get the natural peach seal, but must have seen those 3 sneak attackers attempt to assassinate Lu Xianming. The admiration in the old Demon Blood Shadow's expression became more pronounced, and he said, So the child can be taught. Chapter 1852 Stealing. Chapter 1852 Stealing. There were only 3 minor levels in the ascending origin tier: small accomplishment, great accomplishment, and consummate respectively. Old Demon Blood Shadow was at small accomplishment, but he had stagnated on this cultivation level for who knew how much time, and sustained Immortal's tribulation innumerable times, but his strength had not improved further, while the Immortal's tribulation had become harder and harder to endure. He had a feeling that if he did not break through to great accomplishment, then when the next Immortal's tribulation came, he would not be able to survive it. Didn't you see how others would be looking sage-like, and why would his hair have all turned gray, and more than half had been lost at that? This was connected with the Immortal's tribulation, causing him to look doddering and old. Otherwise, he had also been a handsome man himself many years ago, and had enraptured millions of women with his charms. He speculated that there was hope for him to break through to the great accomplishment, but did not have the slightest confidence that he would be able to survive the tribulation, and had thus placed his hopes on the natural peach seal. However, 99% of natural peach seals were in the hands of Celestial King Tier level forces. In fact, they were in the hands of Celestial King Tiers above 5th heaven. He did not even dare think about it, what more going to steal it? That would really be thinking that he was not dying fast enough. Because his life was hanging in the balance, he had investigated everywhere, and he had actually found out that there was a natural peach seal in Alchemy City. It was said that years ago, an alchemy king had emerged from Alchemy City, and he was able to concoct supreme Tao pills of Celestial King Tier level, and had thus been bestowed 5 natural peach seals by a supreme Celestial King. Because this Celestial King was too aggressive, there was no other force that dared have any ideas about these 5 natural peach seals. Actually, he, too, did not have the intention, but there was a sharp sword hanging over his neck, so he could only take the risk. Moreover, he was not moving personally either. Hadn't he found Ling Han to do the job for him? And then he only had to kill Ling Han to keep the secret, and naturally no one could possibly link him to this matter. Through the passage of time, Alchemy City had already used 3 natural peach seals. At present there were still 2 left. Then, he could use one when he was in great accomplishment, and the next he could use when he ascended to consummate, and that was just enough. Additionally, natural peach seal did not have any effect on Celestial Kings, because it was also Celestial King Tier level, so how could it conceal this kind of destiny? In any case, old Demon Blood Shadow did not have the confidence that he could break through to the Celestial King Tier, either. The ascending origin tier consummate would be his final stop. Furthermore, it was only a possibility that he could reach it. However, as long as he had reached the ascending origin tier consummate, he would at least be able to live a few more epochs, and who knew, maybe another miracle would take place. The natural peach seal can conceal destiny, and allow the heavenly tribulation that you undergo to weaken by at least one level. The old bastard explained to Ling Han. There are a total of 2 natural peach seals in Alchemy City, and I only want one, while the other can be left for your use. Your talent is extraordinary. In fact, you can possibly achieve a 5th severance, but there is absolutely no way you could survive the heavenly tribulation for the 5th severance, and you must use the natural peach seal. How about it? Are you tempted now? Though I have commanded you to do this for me, it is also greatly beneficial for yourself. He tempted Ling Han. This was only deceiving the latter. He would be making use of both natural peach seals, to say the least. Even if he was not going to use it, he could always sell it to another. This thing was not celestial medicine, yet was definitely more valuable than the majority of celestial medicines. Ling Han naturally would not believe him. If this old bastard's words could be trusted, then even pigs would fly. Of course, he would not say it out loud. He only asked, "Then what should I do to be able to steal the natural peach seals?" This was a precious treasure, so how could it be stolen so easily? Ho, then that would have to depend on that brat from previously. Old Demon Blood Shadow said smilingly. That brat is the most likely person to inherit Alchemy City, and I have been secretly following him all this way, offering my protection. With how clever Ling Han was, he immediately realized that this old bastard had long since had the idea of using Lu Xianming to enter into Alchemy City so he could steal the natural peach seals. True, he was a future heir, so he would definitely have the chance of entering into the treasury in the utmost core of the city. He really was enshrouded by bad luck. This was really too unlucky. You go and meet Lu Xianming, follow him, and help him to ascend to the seat of chairperson. When you get the chance, enter into the treasury, and you can steal the natural peach seals. As for how should you go about doing this, there is no need for me to teach you further, right? Old Demon Blood Shadow continued. I will give you 10 million years. By then, if you still have not brought back the natural peach seals, then don't blame me for being cruel. When he said the last sentence, he showed a menacing killing intent. He could not afford any delays. 10 million years was already his limit, and he still had to retain enough time for him to advance to great accomplishment. Ling Han sighed ruefully inside his heart. After going a full circle, he actually still had to go to Alchemy City. However, he did indeed need the natural peach seal, and furthermore, one was not enough, either. He had to get 2. The Empress needed it as well. Then he'd just go and steal them, and create some kind of chaos to be able to inform Commander Guan for free. Ling Han had already made the decision mentally, and thus nodded, and replied, I will do my best. Not your best, but you must succeed. Otherwise, your life will be gone. Old Demon Blood Shadow clapped Ling Han's shoulder, and with every clap, a certain power would surge into Ling Han's body. Immediately, multiple black vein patterns appeared on Ling Han's skin. They were exuding a smoke-like substance, and looked incredibly evil. He couldn't help but grit his teeth. This was really too painful, it was deep to his bones and marrow. I have already set the time for the curse to activate for you, and that is 10 million years later. However, to remind you to make as much use of your time as possible, this black murderous curse will activate every year. And when the black murderous curse takes your life, the level of agony will be 10,000 times worse, so you will only die after having been tortured enough for 10,000 years. Old Demon Blood Shadow withdrew his hand, a strange expression flashing over his features. He kept sensing that there was something strange about Ling Han's body, but when he thought about the more imminent life-threatening danger, to him, 100 million years was really not very long. You see, he had already given Ling Han 10 million years to complete the theft. Forget it, whatever was so strange, he would kill this brat and make a slow, careful study of it once he obtained the natural peach seals. This is the map, and I have already marked the spot for you. Go on then! Old Demon Blood Shadow waved a hand at Ling Han. As he saw it, Ling Han presently was just wasting his life. Ling Han set out, and a feeling of anxiety immediately rose up in his heart. No matter what, he had to first dispel the black murderous curse inside his body. Maybe the Black Tower could do it. He did not immediately enter. Old Demon Blood Shadow had already grown suspicious about him, so at the moment, it was best that he did not use the Black Tower. For an ascending origin tier elite, even if he secretly followed Ling Han, he would not allow him to discover it, just like how Old Demon Blood Shadow first appeared, catching Ling Han completely off guard, and capturing him directly. Alchemy City was very, very far. Thankfully, Ling Han still had Dragonhawk. Dragging this guy out of the Black Tower, and knocking it awake, Ling Han climbed on board, and headed to Alchemy City according to the map. He knew that Old Demon Blood Shadow was definitely following behind him, fearing that he would not give up, and look for someone to dispel the black murderous curse. Ling Han obediently journeyed for a month, and a majestic great city appeared ahead of him. 4-star Great Force, Alchemy City. The whole city was constructed to look like a cauldron, while there were innumerable formation patterns glowing with light on its outside, protecting this ancient city. This should be the most heavily guarded place in the entire Eastern Celestial Realm. They were rich and pompous, so whatever materials they used were the best and most expensive, so they were naturally awesome. After entering into the city, Old Demon Blood Shadow should not dare to follow him any further. That was because once this kind of elite entered into the city, he would definitely draw attention, and be kept under constant monitoring by Alchemy City. And taking the old bastard's nickname into further consideration, he was already called an old demon, so he had to be something like an object of scorn. He might not dare to easily reveal himself. He would be worried that he was going to be beaten. Chapter 1853 Time Cultivation Chamber. Chapter 1853 Time Cultivation Chamber. There were many damn rules for entering a 1-star city, what more entering a 4-star great city. Though Ling Han had entered into the city, this city was divided into 5 regions in total. Aside from the first level, which could be entered just by paying the entrance fee, the other 4 levels could only be entered after submitting an application. For example, a Severing Mundane tier could apply to go to the 2nd layer, Dividing Soul tier could go to the 3rd level, Immortal Palace tier could go to the 4th level, and Ascending Origin tier could go to the 5th level. Additionally, alchemists could also go to different levels based on their respective skill in alchemy. Of course, application was one story, but approval was quite another. Ling Han first found an inn to stay in on the 1st level. At present, he had to deal with the problem of the black murderous curse first. He immediately entered into the Black Tower. "Small tower?" Ling Han called out softly. "Black murderous curse, this is a little troublesome. If I use my power to erase it for you, that would very likely alert a few old monsters. Thus, the best method is still for you to experience rising from the ashes again, and the black murderous curse would naturally be dispelled." Small Tower soon gave a response. "Will it affect me at other times?" Ling Han asked again. "No," Small Tower said. "It's fine even if you don't dispel it. Even if the curse activates, and you die once, you can still revive through rising from the ashes. Furthermore, you can also use the black murderous curse to temper yourself. Actually, this can be considered a blessing too." Ling Han's mouth couldn't help but twitch. "You haven't had a taste of when the black murderous curse activates, have you? That is definitely not a pleasant feeling. And he had to experience it once a year. He really had no wish to experience it again. To become a supreme celestial king, one must experience extreme suffering. If you do not even have this kind of perseverance, you had best not think of the 5th severance, and just become an ordinary celestial king, enjoying a mediocre life," Small Tower said calmly. "Thought though I know you are just egging me on, having a Tsundere tower like you cast disdain on me like this, I really am not going to yield." Ling Han laughed loudly, showing his noble aspirations. "Fine, I will struggle a bit then." Ling Han exited the Black Tower. Since there was no way he could seek out Commander Guan at this moment, he would just have the latter take the initiative to find him, and to achieve this, he had to become well known. There were many ways to become known, for example running bare naked through the streets, or having S*X in the open. And this was too tasteless. He was not the large black dog, so how could he do something like that? Then, should he kill a few profligate young masters with powerful backgrounds? No, this was a 4-star city. If he started a massacre, then he would have to flee for his life before Commander Guan could make his way here. This clearly was not reasonable either. Then, there was only one way left. Wasn't this the Alchemy City? What a coincidence. He was the Alchemy Emperor. Then, let him come and conquer this city so that it would become an alchemy city that was deserving of its name. He already had a certain mastery of alchemy basics. Xiang Yan had taught him a great many things. However, for the moment, he was unable to concoct a complete pill. After all, the reincarnation tree only helped to increase appreciation and understanding, but could not improve his practical skill. Something like alchemy still depended on practice. The Empress was in seclusion, so Ling Han brought the heavenly phoenix divine maiden out for a breath of fresh air, walking around on the first level. This place naturally was also overwhelmingly huge. There were mountains and seas, and it could be compared to a gigantic planet. To completely walk a full circle here would need astonishingly long time. Thankfully, the majority of facilities were focused in the commercial area. Thus, they only had to walk around there. Whatever there was in the first level could be bought here. Ling Han mostly wanted to focus on alchemy. With his natural talent, he only had to show some of his skill, and there would definitely be alchemists going wild with joy, wanting to welcome and recruit him. He was definitely not going to do as the Blood Shadow Old Demon had said, and become a subordinate for Lu Xianming. Who knew, maybe he would really develop here, and treat this place like his future base in the celestial realm. That was because alchemy was a part of him that could not be severed, and this at least was the sacred place of alchemy in the eastern celestial realm. If he inherited the alchemy city, then wouldn't it become very natural for him to take the natural peach seal for his use? Would he still have to steal it? After Ling Han walked around, he gained a very great pleasant surprise. There were time cultivation chambers here. What was their use? The time inside would be accelerated to a much faster rate than outside. One day inside, and no matter what you were doing, you could save endless time. For example, concocting an alchemical pill would normally need 10 days, but inside, it would only require 5 days, 3 days, or even 1 day. Ling Han made some detailed inquiries. The time cultivation chamber here only had 4 acceleration effects. 2 days, 3 days, 4 days, and 5 days, which meant that time could be sped up by 2 to 5 times. It could not be helped. This was only the first level area, and it was rumored that there were better time cultivation chambers further upwards, such as 10 times, 20 times, and 30 times. The strongest could reach 100 times, and only the 5th level had that. Furthermore, it was not something that one could make use of just by paying for it. The more the time was accelerated, the more resources it would expend. To say nothing of 10 times or 100 times, merely accelerating the time by 2 times, one would have to pay a star stone for each day. And for 3 times it would be 2 star stones, 4 times would be 5 star stones, and 5 times was 10 star stones. In terms of quality to price ratio, acceleration by 2 times was the most worthwhile. Acceleration by 3, 4 times was also extremely favored, and acceleration by 5 times was a privilege that belonged to the rich. If Ling Han wanted to comprehend Tao, it was still the reincarnation tree that was better. At the beginning, 1 day was equivalent to a year, already accelerating time by over 300 times. What more now, when the acceleration rate had reached more than 3 million times? But in terms of alchemy, the reincarnation tree was of no help at all. After he found out that there was something like the time cultivation chamber, he immediately became very interested. Xiang Yan had once said that he could only concoct his first cauldron of celestial pills after 10 years, but with the help of the time cultivation chamber, he could shrink this time down to 2 years. And if Ling Han went to the second level, he could reduce this time even further. He immediately made his decision. First, he would apply for entry to the second level, and at the same time, he would concoct pills here. When his application was approved, he would go to the second level. Time could not be wasted. Then, he would only have to concoct a cauldron of pills and stun the masses. Naturally, there would be Grand Masters of Alchemy stepping out to admire a prodigy like him, and it would be a natural turn of events for him to enter further into the third level, the fourth level, and so on. With the reincarnation tree for comprehension, and added with the full acceleration of the time cultivation chamber, Ling Han did not believe that he could not become an outstanding alchemist in a short period of time. Let's go! He and the heavenly phoenix divine maiden then headed towards the time cultivation chamber. There was only one place that had it in this whole first level, and that was in this commercial area, which was not far. The two of them soon arrived at their destination. It was not of much use to the heavenly phoenix divine maiden. She wanted to advance to the severing mundane tier, and would need accumulation over endless time, and the reincarnation tree was the true key for that. Otherwise, even acceleration by 100 times was not enough. She had only accompanied Ling Han here to take a look, and later she would enter into the Black Tower. For all eternity. Ling Han read the signboard outside this time cultivation chamber. This was a very large courtyard, and was separated into several hundred cultivation chambers. A profligate young master wouldn't come out and have some ideas about me, right? The heavenly phoenix divine maiden joked. She knew Ling Han's trade as a magnet for trouble. He was constantly drawing trouble. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, "There's no harm in taking a look." The two of them entered the courtyard. There was a place selling tickets. At the entrance, every cultivation chamber could only be opened with its specialized seal. Dear to customers, what acceleration rate of cultivation chamber would you like? I suggest you choose one with 3 times acceleration rate. The quality to price ratio and practical effects are the best, the ticket vendor said very encouragingly. Every individual that came was a customer. 5 times, and we'll take it for a month first. Ling Han drew out 300 star stones and handed them over. He had no shortage of money. Sure. After the ticket vendor took the star stones, he examined them slightly, then handed Ling Han a seal, and said, "Customer, please keep this well. The number for your cultivation chamber is 501. Coincidentally, this is the final cultivation chamber with 5 times acceleration rate. Let me give you a kind reminder. Each cultivation chamber can only allow one person to enter. The moment a second person appears, that cultivation chamber would automatically close, and it will be considered as you having forfeited the remaining time." Ling Han nodded. He had long since known this rule. This was to prevent someone from using a spatial god tool to bring a large group of people in. He was just about to leave when he saw a young man bustling over in a run. The latter exclaimed, "Give me a 5 times acceleration rate cultivation chamber." Chapter 1854. It really was not me drawing trouble. Chapter 1854. It really was not me drawing trouble. 5 times acceleration rate cultivation chamber? The ticket vendor shook his head. There's none left. The last one has just been rented out. As he said that, he cast a look at Ling Han. Ling Han suddenly had a thought. Could it be that a melodramatic event was going to happen again? That young man turned to look at Ling Han, and his expression was all smiles as he asked, "This brother, could you sublet this cultivation chamber to me? I can offer you 10% more star stones." Ling Han smiled. At first, he had thought that this guy would throw around his wealth, and use 10 times the star stones to crush him, yet the result was actually just an additional 10%. However, precisely because of this, he could tell that this character was no profligate. Otherwise, this guy would definitely be the pettiest profligate in the world. Ling Han shook his head and said, "I do not wish to sublet it." That young man was very anxious, and determinedly kept on bargaining with him, hoping that Ling Han could agree, yet was tactfully refused. He did not threaten Ling Han, and said what would happen to him if he did not oblige or something along those lines, though. Ling Han was actually slightly proud. This time, no conflict had happened. This seemed to be the first time in history, right? Not bad, this was a matter worth drinking to. Seeing his expression, the heavenly phoenix divine maiden involuntarily covered her mouth and laughed. She naturally understood what Ling Han was thinking, but this husband of hers would actually be proud because of such a matter, which was proof enough of how astonishing his halo of trouble was. "Zhu Jin, are you done?" A voice filled with loftiness rang out, and a young man walked over. He was clearly walking towards the other young man, but as he walked, his eyes passed over the heavenly phoenix divine maiden, and he could no longer turn his gaze away. The heavenly phoenix divine maiden showed a hint of displeasure, and leaned her body slightly towards Ling Han, using Ling Han's body to block the other's gaze. The first young man's name was Zhu Jin. He showed a hint of awkwardness, and turning towards the other young man said, "Young master Yu, I'm really sorry. The last 5 times acceleration chamber has just been rented out." The young man that was called young master Yu cast a gaze full of suspicion at Zhu Jin, and asked, "Hey, you aren't just trying to save money, and deliberately lying to me, are you? How could I dare to?" Zhu Jin rubbed his forehead, but there was no sweat. "If young master Yu does not believe me, you can ask the staff here." The ticket vendor was cooperative. Though he did not recognize this young master Yu, he still said, "That's right, young master Yu. The last 5 times acceleration rate cultivation chamber has been rented to this customer. Why don't you rent a 4 times acceleration rate cultivation chamber instead? The actual effects are not much different." "Rubbish!" Young master Yu immediately rebuked, the spit from his mouth almost splashing onto Zhu Jin's face. "Lu Yu will either not use any at all, or I will use the best. Otherwise, how would I be able to face others when I return to Blue Eternity City?" After blustering around for a while, his eyes focused on Ling Han. "You, hand over your cultivation chamber to me, and however much money you want, you can go and find that guy." He pointed at Zhu Jin, a hint of pride in his expression. This was shown deliberately for the benefit of Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. "How about it? I am awesome, right? I have a lackey that I can order around as I like, and he will give me money as long as I ask for it." Ling Han sighed. He had really thought that he could have a normal experience this time, and would not attract trouble, but reality proved that it was easy to dodge an open attack, but hard to guard against despicable people. He had again encountered a despicable character. Zhu Jin got a scare. Though he was slightly well off, he definitely could not hold up to such an exorbitant demand. He hurriedly laughed and said, "Please don't joke around, young master Yu. My friend, do me a favor, all right, and I'll give you 30% more of star stones." "Zhu Jin, how could you be so petty? Don't make this beauty laugh at you, and don't make me lose face." Lu Yu humphed, appearing to be very displeased. "To bargain like this in front of a beauty, couldn't you be a little more generous?" Zhu Jin grimaced. He was only the young master of a small clan, and he was deliberately escorting Lu Yu around this time to curry favor with him. That was because the Zhu clan wanted to get some business from the Lu clan. But Lu Yu was putting on airs here in front of a beauty, and was just moving his mouth, while what Zhu Jin was paying was actual money. With how small the Zhu clan was, how could they hold up to such exorbitant expense? "Young master Yu, the 4 times acceleration rate cultivation chambers really are not much different, and I can rent for a longer time too," he said courteously to Lu Yu. "Humph, then what about my pride?" Lu Yu's expression was filled with arrogance. He was practically raising his head so high his nostrils were facing Zhu Jin. "Don't forget, it is not just your Zhu clan, there is still the Jin clan, Ma clan, and Qing clan, and they are all cordially entertaining me. If you can't bear to part with a bit of money, there will be others who can." Zhu Jin could only grimace once more, and turned to Ling Han and said, "Friend, I am really sorry, but could we negotiate a bit? I am willing to compensate you with double the amount." This time, he had really spent a lot of money. He could only pray that Ling Han had not rented for too long a period of time. The Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden could not bear to see Lu Yu's arrogance, and also sympathized with how Shu Jin was acting so humble. Turning to Ling Han, she said, "Why don't we just sublet it to him then?" In any case, Ling Han had already applied for qualification to enter into the second level. He had come here only for the experience, so subletting and using a 4 times acceleration rate chamber instead would not have too much effect. At first, there was definitely no way that Ling Han would give way for someone like Liu Yu, but with a soft plea from his wife like this, and Zhu Jin had been polite all this while too, his heart softened, and thus he said, "Fine then, I'll let you have it." "Many thanks." "Many thanks." Zhu Jin hurriedly bowed extremely low, offering his grateful thanks. Liu Yu saw this and scoffed, saying, "So after bargaining for so long, you are just a greedy man. Pay, who do you think you are, to put on a pretense of reservedness in front of me? Brat, come here and kneel in thanks for allowing you to make a good profit." Ling Han had stretched out his hand halfway to hand over the seal, but when he heard this, he became furious, and suddenly withdrew his hand. This time, it was definitely not his halo of trouble, but rather this kind of trash was indeed asking to be beaten. "So how cheap could you get? I have already let you have the cultivation chamber, so you just proudly go since you already have the upper hand. But you insist on being cheap and asking for a beating, heh?" Ling Han set his eyes on Liu Yu and said, "Swallow the words that you have said." Yet Liu Yu was determined to cause trouble, though it was not because he disliked Ling Han, but rather for the sake of the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden. Though the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden had not advanced into the severing mundane tier, which decreased her charms, she was an exquisite beauty, after all. There were at most only 100 that could match her beauty in the whole Alchemy city. This seemed to be a large number, but just how many people were there in a 4-star city, and how many elites were there? Liu Yu could only look up at any single one of them, swallow his saliva, and then let his imagination roam in his head. But now, an exquisite beauty had actually appeared at the first level. What did this mean? He was completely qualified to pluck this beautiful bloom for himself. Ling Han? Who did he think he was? Just a country bumpkin, and he thought he could contest with him over a woman. Seeing Ling Han choose to confront him directly, Liu Yu was not angered, but rather pleased. With a comparison like this, only then would his superiority be presented clearly. "Oh, you want me to apologize?" Liu Yu was very arrogant, slanting a sideways glance at Ling Han. "Just who do you think you are? What qualifies you for that?" Chapter 1855. Chapter 1855, Think I'm made of clay? Ling Han broke into a grin, turned to look at the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden, and asked, "Fomer, my wife, can you tolerate that?" "No," the Heavenly Phoenix Divine Maiden said with loathing. This Liu Yu kept using shifty eyes to peer at her, which made her feel disgusted. Ling Han shook his head, and said, "Neither can I." He took a step forwards, and walked towards Liu Yu. Hey, hey, hey. We can discuss things politely, don't damage a good relationship." Zhu Jin hurriedly jumped out to mediate the conflict. He was a businessman, and amiability made you rich. Furthermore, it was indeed Liu Yu who was too unconscientious in this matter. They had already kindly allowed him to have the cultivation chamber, so why did he still have to be so imperious? Did he really think that the other was made of clay, and could be squeezed and molded as he liked? "Zhu Jin, get lost!" Liu Yu said aggressively, and disdainfully declared. "Through all the years in my life, this is the first time I have encountered someone that dares to think of making me apologize." Ling Han gave a light push, and Zhu Jin was already pushed to the side. He stretched out a hand to grab Liu Yu. Alchemy City had its laws. Fighting was not forbidden, but murder was definitely not allowed off course. You could completely commit murder deep in the mountains and forests, as long as there were no witnesses. Ordinarily, as long as the person who had died was not someone too important, and there was no one bringing a lawsuit, Alchemy City couldn't be bothered to care. And there was another factor. Unless it was the inferior side that had taken the initiative to provoke the other, elites were strictly forbidden from making a move on those weaker than them. Because there were too many forces in Alchemy City, if a junior from any clan was beaten, and the seniors ran out in search of revenge, wouldn't the whole city be in complete chaos? Thus, the matters of juniors would be solved amongst juniors. And Ling Han knew this, which was why he would move without reservations like this. As long as he did not beat Lu Yu to death, there wouldn't be any dividing soul-tier elites coming out to deal with him. "How dare you!" Lu Yu sneered. He delivered a palm strike towards Ling Han. Even though he was arrogant, as if he was a profligate young master, in truth, his natural talent in cultivation was not weak in the slightest. Otherwise, he couldn't have possibly become one of the heirs of the martial arts branch of the Lu clan. The Lu clan of Blue Eternity City was a noble clan of alchemy. Blue Eternity City was a subordinate force under the jurisdiction of Alchemy City. It was similarly filled with alchemists. There were a total of 2 Grand Elders in the Lu clan. One was focused on alchemy, but he was only a 1-star alchemist. Even so, a 1-star alchemist was actually already pretty amazing. The other Grand Elder specialized in martial arts, and was a dividing soul-tier elite. After all, mere alchemy was not enough. They couldn't ask others for help whenever something came up, after all. Only their own strength was the most reliable. And thus, there were 2 branches of the Lu clan. Those who had high natural talent in martial arts would be focused on cultivating martial arts, and those with natural talent in alchemy would focus on alchemy. For example, Lu Yu did not have any particularly bright talent in alchemy, but his natural talent in martial arts was not too bad. Naturally, he had entered into the martial arts branch. Because of Lu Yu's background, when he had come to Alchemy City for leisure this time, he was already targeted by many merchant noble clans wanting to obtain a new supply route of alchemical pills through connections with him. In the celestial realm, the supply of alchemical pills was always less than demand. Having so many revolving around him, contesting for his favor, Lu Yu's sense of superiority naturally exploded, and he had also taken the opportunity to make exorbitant demands, and ask for benefits. For example, Blue Eternity City did not have this time cultivation chamber, and he was determined to try it out no matter what. And now, Ling Han actually dared make a move on him? Did he really think that just because Lu Yu had come from a clan of alchemists, his battle prowess was weak? You are really much too naive. Ling Han did not take it to heart at all. To say nothing of the fact that Lu Yu was not even a king tier, and was a weakling that had just advanced into the 2nd Severance, so what if he was a 4th Severance peak stage king tier? A palm descended, and Lu Yu was picked up by his neck. Woo! Lu Yu's limbs waved around madly in pain, but it was only pointless effort. In Ling Han's hands, he was nothing more than an infant. Friend! Friend! Xu Jin was almost jumping around in his anxiety. If Lu Yu was really wounded, not only would the Zhu clan be unable to do business with the Lu clan, if the Lu clan announced and demanded that other alchemists not do business with them, either, then the Zhu clan would be in big trouble. But he could not get near Ling Han at all. Under the pressure of his aura, he could only pace back and forth 9 meters away. Only now did he know just how powerful Ling Han was. He couldn't help but sigh involuntarily in his heart. Lu Yu, why did you have to trifle with him for no reason like this? He had already allowed you to have the cultivation chamber, and you still insisted on being pompous, so who would be beaten if not you? But he couldn't just stand and watch, either, though he also quite disliked Lu Yu, wanting nothing more than for the latter to be beaten. It should not be done in front of his eyes at least. He continuously mediated from the sidelines, talking about Lu Yu's background, and hoping that he could convince Ling Han not to be reckless. How could Ling Han possibly give him any regard? He only set his eyes on Lu Yu, and said, "With such a smelly mouth, did you grow up from eating mud?" The large black dog was not here, and he was not very creative, so he could only pick up a rock from the ground, crush it, then stuff the dirt into Lu Yu's mouth. Woo! Lu Yu wanted to spit it out, but could not do as he wished at all, and could only shake his head in pain. Actually, with his cultivation level, eating rocks was not a big deal. The problem was that this was too humiliating. Some have ended their cultivation, and just happened to walk out. When they saw this scene, they involuntarily burst into laughter. Lu Yu's face instantly flushed bright red, and he felt as if those gazes from the spectators were like blades that pierced painfully into him. He had never, ever, been so humiliated. He stared at Ling Han furiously. He vowed that he would kill this person, definitely. Hey, you still haven't learned your lesson? Ling Han asked coldly. Pa, he delivered a slap over. Pooh! The rocks in Lu Yu's mouth instantly spewed out. Not only that, there were also a few broken teeth mixed in. One side of his face heavily swelled up, which showed how strong the force of this slap was. This naturally was because Ling Han had not used his full strength. Otherwise, Lu Yu's form and spirit would have long since been obliterated. Pun! Ling Han pressed down again, and Lu Yu's whole head sunk deeply into the tiles. Thankfully, severing mundane tear had too much time and origin power, so they could temper their physique whilst they cultivated, so their physique was strong enough. Otherwise, even if Lu Yu didn't die from this blow, he would be half dead. But even so, he was still seeing stars, and didn't even remember who he was anymore. His arms were drooping weakly, while his behind was raised high. This position was a little ambiguous. Ling Han couldn't help but think of the large black dog. If the large black dog was here, he would probably do that, right? He revealed a demon-like grin and said, "Thong'er, my wife, leave for a while." The heavenly phoenix divine maiden nodded, and entered into the black tower. Meanwhile, Ling Han drew out a bamboo pole. This was a saintly item, the 9-segment purple bamboo, and was astonishingly tough. Each segment would only grow in 100 million years, and it was extremely valuable. He snickered, and with a pu, he stabbed the bamboo pole into Lu Yu's behind. Even if Lu Yu's senses were already a little fuzzy at this point, the pain of having his A*S stabbed still forced him back to consciousness. He tried his best to shake his behind, wanting to expel the strange object, but how could it possibly go the way he wanted? Zhu Jin, meanwhile, was already completely dumbfounded. It was over. The young master of the Lu clan actually had his A*S stabbed under his escort. He would not be able to absolve himself of his responsibility, either. He wanted to cry, but had no tears. Though Ling Han's current action had gone a little too far, could he really be blamed? If he was being honest, and if it was himself in the former's place, would he be even more furious? Why should Ling Han just take it lying down? He was not a saint. In the future, be a good man. There are many people in this world that have better strength and background than you. You should feel fortunate that this is Alchemy City. Otherwise, with my temper, I would have long since killed you. Ling Han patted the bamboo pole, and it shook under his hand, causing Lu Yu's screams of pain to lift a few notes higher. Chapter 1856 Finding a Helper. Chapter 1856 Finding a Helper. There was naturally no way that such a sudden event could affect Ling Han. Within the capacity of the game rules, he really was not afraid of anyone. The prerequisite was that he, too, had to be playing according to the rules, and could not step too far out of bounds. If a dividing soul tear did not move out, who could do anything against him? Ling Han clapped his hands. This saintly material was considered as his gift. In any case, he definitely did not want it back any longer. Even if it was plucked out, it would stink for 10,000 years. He used the seal to open the cultivation chamber, entered, and then drew out his cauldron, getting ready to concoct alchemical pills. "Young master, you!" Zhu Jin hurriedly approached to help Lu Yu up. He first helped him pull out his head from the tiles. "My behind! My behind!" Lu Yu wanted to rub his behind, but he had just stretched his hand back, and was immediately assaulted by agonizing pain. He involuntarily pushed his waist forwards, but with a move like this, the bamboo pole also went in further, and his behind felt another bout of extreme pain. It just so happened that someone had walked out from the cultivation chamber. Seeing how there was a long bamboo pole stabbed into Lu Yu's A*S, he was first stunned, and then immediately erupted with raucous laughter. He was definitely not the only one. The stone chamber doors beside him had also opened, and another person walked out. He similarly was stunned for a moment before laughing so hard that there were tears in his eyes. Brother Ma, what is this man doing? He's a pervert that likes having his A*s stabbed. What hardcore tastes! The two of them clearly knew each other. They should have come together to cultivate here, as only then could they exit at the same time. As they watched Lu Yu, they conversed, and then walked outwards. When Lu Yu heard this, his face naturally turned dull red in color, and he felt as if his whole life had become dark and gray, without the slightest bit of brightness left. He gritted his teeth, and said to Zhu Jin, "Bastard, quickly pull that thing out." Zhu Jin nodded, and placed his hands on the bamboo pole. "Ow, ow, ow!" Lu Yu called out quickly. With each slight tremble of the hand, his A*s would be tortured another time. Zhu Jin suddenly drew out with force, and the bamboo pole was finally pulled out. Then, with a piu, an arrow of blood also sprayed out from Lu Yu's A*s. "Ah!" Lu Yu screamed out again, but it was better to deal with painful things quickly. After this bamboo pole had been pulled out, though the pain he suffered was heart-piercing, and he felt a sudden moment of emptiness, he finally needed not suffer any more torture. He covered his behind with one hand, fire practically shooting from his eyes. His trousers had naturally been completely dyed crimson from blood. "Bastard, we are completely irreconcilable. Young master, you forget it," Zhu Jin advised. He was a native citizen of Alchemy City, and naturally was very clear about the laws of the city. Ordinarily speaking, if Lu Yu wanted to get his revenge, he could only find a severing mundane tear to take vengeance for him, or wait until Ling Han went into some desolate, remote location so he could send out a dividing soul tear instead. But from the strength that Ling Han had previously displayed, how many severing mundane tears could actually be capable of suppressing him? It would probably have to be someone at King Tier level, right? Zhu Jin was only a normal severance, and as he saw it, Ling Han definitely could not be a King Tier. Otherwise, what did he mean by coming to the 5th level? And because Lu Yu was an outsider, the application to enter into the 2nd level had not been approved yet, and that was why he could only tour around in the 1st level. Otherwise, he would not have met Ling Han either. Thus, though Ling Han's previous display was astonishing, Zhu Jin still thought that he could be suppressed by a King Tier. The problem here was, how were they supposed to get a King Tier to move out for them? To say nothing of the fact that he, Zhu Jin, definitely did not have that ability. Lu Yu similarly did not. "You get lost!" Lu Yu pushed Zhu Jin aside, his expression filled with loathing. As he saw it, Zhu Jin had only wanted to watch him being humiliated. Otherwise, why hadn't he helped him just now? To offer a few words of advice so insincerely, who didn't know how to do this? Despicable! Zhu Jin wanted to make another attempt. After all, the Zhu clan was a merchant clan. "Young master, you. Fuck, are you scramming or not?" Lu Yu glared, feeling that Zhu Jin was repulsive, practically not so much better than Ling Han. He had suffered such a massive grievance, and he actually advised him to forget it? Fuck him! Did he think that he really had to depend on their Zhu clan? Humph, there were quite a number of clans fighting to express goodwill to him. It was only that he had been blind to actually choose a guy like this that was so cowardly and disloyal. Humph! With a flutter of his sleeve, he rushed out the doors. However, with him leaving like this, his behind was naturally shockingly painful, and his hands involuntarily came up to support himself. Then, with his legs clamped tightly together, he walked ahead in an incredibly awkward manner. However, a severing mundane tear was still a severing mundane tear after all. Even walking in such a manner, his speed was still incredibly fast. In an instant he had disappeared without a trace. Zhu Jin couldn't help but sigh. He did not know how to react, but ultimately, he did not set off in pursuit any longer. He was also a man that had his pride. He had already repeatedly humbled himself, yet was only brushed off with a cold shoulder. He had really had enough. Lu Yu walked some distance away, and involuntarily stopped, beginning to ponder. Whom should he find? Actually, he also knew the laws of Alchemy City. Thus, if the helper he found was not strong enough, that would actually be seeking his own humiliation. That's it, I'll find Sun Dong! His eyes lit up, and he clapped his hands. However, because of this action, it pulled on the muscles in his behind, causing him to yell out again. The passers-by on the streets all turned to look in his direction. Lu Yu hurriedly entered into his spatial god tool. Whatever the case, he had to change his clothes first. The Sun clan's strength is very impressive in the first place, and Sun Dong is even known as the Little King tier, with a cultivation level of 4th Severance Peak stage. He is just a little proud, and not as obedient as the others, which was why I didn't seek him out. The Sun clan is also a supporter of Holy Sun Lu Xianning. If Sun Dong is still unable to deal with that brat, his only option would definitely be to ask for help from Lu Xianning. If even Lu Xianning still can't do anything to that guy, then I'll yield. I'll go seek Sun Dong out now. Lu Yu exited the spatial god tool, and walked all the way to a brothel in an incredibly awkward manner. Sun clan was a 3-star force. Their main clan was at the 4th level. If Lu Yu wanted to find the Sun clan, he had to first contact members of the Sun clan, and have the Sun clan step out on his behalf to be able to bring him up to that level. But how could Lu Yu have so much time? Thankfully, this Sun Dong was most fond of frequenting brothels, and the prostitute industry was best developed on the 5th level. In a whole year, there were at least 8 months that he had spent here. Thus, Lu Yu very proficiently found his way over. After all, he, too, had played around here for some time, so he knew his way around. The people in the brothel also recognized a big customer like him, and when they saw him enter, they all greeted him respectively. Hey, young master Yu, why are you clamping your behind so tightly? It can't be that you played too wildly last night, and got our at ped, right? A woman approached him, and used the silken handkerchief in her hand to lightly slap Lu Yu's chest. If this was any other time, Lu Yu would definitely laugh out loud, and take the advantage of the opportunity to grope her breasts a bit, but now his rage was unbridled. Pa! He had delivered a slap right at that woman's face. Who are you saying has been our at ped? He demanded sinisterly, feeling an urge to commit murder. Instantly, everyone fell silent out of fear, not daring to make the slightest noise. Ha 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 ha, Lu Yu, why are you in such a nasty mood? You really got our at ped? Amidst a bout of loud laughter, a young man walked out, each of his arms slung around the shoulders of a woman in revealing clothing on either side. It was Sun Dong. Young Master Dong! Lu Yu hurriedly approached. In front of the other party, he did not dare to put on any airs at all. This was also the reason why he had not sought out Sun Dong previously, as he would not have any feeling of superiority. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.